Gamers of the Underworld. Chapters 351 to 373. Chapter 351. Appearance of the Ogres. Unknown 3. It's no good without a new bug. Sakura Idle Chat. Don't think that you're safe because of the NPC status. The Winterfell Dungeon Lord has to become part of an instance dungeon eventually. Green Spinach. Predestined third Winterfell crisis. Not daytime. Are the ogres not dead yet? Andrew has been killed, so why are they still alive? The response of the gamers was enthusiastic. Brew was surprised when he saw Sherlock's updates and curiously asked, "Lord Sherlock, do you intend to let the gamers from Victoria City participate in this battle?" I think that it's a good chance for the two factions to meet. It's a good opportunity to test and do research for future management, Sherlock said directly. This is a good chance. But Lord Sherlock, how do you intend to go about it? First, we have to capture an ogre. Sherlock stood up and chose an old and tattered cloak, then said to Eggface, "I'm leaving for a few days to capture an ogre. Take care of the dungeon, Eggface." The eyes of Eggface lit up, and he said, "Ah? Lord Sherlock is going out? Remember to wear more clothes, drink more warm water, and take care of your health. Come back early, remember to come back early." Sherlock was about to leave, but he paused and looked at Eggface and the computer, saying, "I feel that I have to find some work for you." Victoria City had occupied half of the designated location. In actual fact, the city only occupied a small spot in the middle of the forest, with the wooden walls constructed at the boundary of the forest. According to tradition, the gamers gave the woods a nice name, Moonlight Forest. Is it because there is moonlight shining on the forest? Sherlock walked in the woods with 3 dazed ogres following behind him. They were ogres that Sherlock brought from the ogre stronghold. It was a simple process, in which Sherlock found the main gate and snuck in. Then, he captured the guards at the gate, which were the 3 ogres. Brew answered Sherlock's question quickly, "No, I feel that they want to clear the woods by the end of the month." "Is that so?" Sherlock pondered for a while, but he didn't intend to probe further. He stood in the woods and surveyed his surroundings. "This location is good. I'll set up a few direction indicators." A small black dung beetle was pushing a small ball of feces to the leg of a wooden bed, and next to the bed was a man wearing metal shoes. In the dim room, one could see the deep eye sockets with dark rings on his face, which made him look like a panda. Lancelot sat on the side of the bed and sighed. "So tiring. Pom, pom, pom." Hasty door knocks were heard. Lord Lancelot, it's time to get up and work." "We're starting work." A commotion was heard outside the door. "NPC, come out and work." "Why isn't he working? This is cracking me up. In this game, the NPCs have to go to work. Haven't you seen how Simba from Eternal Kingdom threw improved equipment into the furnace and announced improvement failure so that he could leave work on time? Wait, what about the shattering effect? Isn't there a special effect for immediate smelting? Why would I deceive you?" The discussion forum members were shocked. "That's so funny, ha 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 ha." Lancelot sighed. He thought his job was merely to teach these construction gamers a few combat techniques and how to play war games, but he discovered he was too naive. These citizens weren't construction workers but lunatics. They didn't feel pain and exhaustion while working every day. Besides working, they would look for him to learn combat techniques. Even when they were wounded during training, they didn't request a rest. Instead, they trained harder until their bodies could no longer take the damage, then they changed to a new one. Lancelot witnessed trainees identical to those who had just died appear from the teleport portal, and it wasn't only one incident but many incidents. They seemed to have the ability to revive from death. Their corpses would simply transform into mana and vanish. Lancelot would feel that they were devils with human faces, but when he saw them learning diligently to become sacred knights, he dismissed such thoughts. Devils couldn't possibly learn knowledge from the sacred light. But how did they manage to revive frequently? Perhaps it was what the Grand Priest Baldhead had said, that they were God's chosen ones, and what happened to them were miracles. Lancelot couldn't explain the strange happenings any other way. Pom, pom, pom. The frantic door knocks were heard again. Lancelot wore his full body armor and hung his sword by his waist before walking out. Outside the door, the sun had just appeared above the horizon, and the rays were gentle. In the empty space in front of his house was a group of gamers who were bursting with enthusiasm. waiting there in anticipation of a new class. They were the ones who knocked frantically on his door. Lancelot rubbed his panda eyes and patted his face as he walked towards them. Lancelot was familiar with his work. He didn't teach them advanced fighting techniques and instead taught them basic combat postures, vital parts of the body, dodging, and parrying. These techniques weren't complex, and they could master it within an hour. Whether they practiced and became familiar with the moves would be up to them. Before Lancelot ended the first class, he heard someone shout, "Gosh! An ogre! I saw ogres in the forest." His voice was like a spark that ignited a barrel of explosives. Victoria City was bursting with excitement as the gamers quickly gathered and followed that man into the forest to look for the ogres. Lancelot wanted to stop them, but it was too late. Thousands of gamers had gathered and walked towards the woods, with even his trainees joining the fray. Lancelot had no choice but to run to the castle to find Duchess Lilo. Ogres were an underworld race, and the appearance of such a race indicated that the tunnel connecting both worlds was discovered by the ogres. The vile and evil underworld creatures could be assembled there, waiting to charge out. Since Victoria City was the closest to the cave, it wouldn't be spared the calamity. Not just Victoria City, the entire human kingdom could be exterminated. As Lancelot ran to the entrance of the castle, he encountered the three hamsters, who were the assistants and spokesmen of Duchess Lilo. After all, the mysterious Duchess Lilo seldom walked out of her small castle. "What are you doing here, Sir Lancelot? Shouldn't you be following your trainees to fight against the ogres?" Big Boss Hamster walked out and asked with a frown. "They are ogres. The underworld creatures must have discovered the tunnel, and if there are ogres, there will be other vile creatures. I suggest we leave this place immediately and seek help from the Duke of York's castle." Lancelot said gravely, "Asking the human lords for help? I don't think." Second Boss hugged his fat tummy and laughed. Before he finished speaking, he was punched in the stomach by Big Boss, stopping him. "Apologies, Sir Lancelot. Though your suggestion is constructive, our great Duchess Lilo will never abandon her territory and citizens." Though Big Boss spoke righteously, his helium voice diminished the importance. But Lancelot was about to respond, but he was interrupted by Big Boss, who said, "No buts. Sir Lancelot, we're now going to the location of the ogres. We have to fight them instead of fleeing." Big Boss announced this loudly. "Wait, aren't we supposed to eat?" Fat Otaku asked, bewildered. Lancelot was puzzled and asked, "Wait, only 3 ogres? You already knew about them?" Big Boss was taken aback, while Second Boss stammered, "Oh, of course not. How could we know beforehand? It's Duchess Lilo. She's a great magician, and her prediction skill is powerful." "Yes, that's right," Big Boss said quickly. "Can we go for our meal?" Fat Otaku looked on in anticipation. Lancelot felt that the 3 hamsters were behaving suspiciously, but the important thing to do was to deal with the ogres. After pondering, he followed the 3 hamsters and ran deeper into the forest. Chapter 352. Hey, is that customer service? The rotting leaves were covered with another thick layer of new leaves. A short figure emitted, "Zi-ya, Zi-ya," sounds and was about to walk forward when someone stopped his advance and gestured nervously. The figure was in a daze and spoke unhappily, "DMNU, if there's a problem." "Ooh." He didn't manage to complete his sentence before someone covered his mouth and pointed nervously to the clearing ahead, where there were 3 ogres talking loudly. However, they could only hear soft voices since it was a distance away. The gamers of Victoria City couldn't understand the language of the ogres. Lancelot squatted nearby and was feeling chills due to the behavior of the gamers. They had been chatting non-stop since they entered the forest. Lancelot wanted to order them to keep quiet, but it was of no use. Soon, the gamers discovered the whereabouts of the ogres. They said, "Gosh, someone on the forum encountered the ogres and was killed. They're nearby. Find the blood trails, it should be around." For the next hour, they continued chatting. Someone on the forum? The post on the forum? What was discussed on the forum? Forum, forums, forums, forums. What kind of intelligence organization was the forum? Lancelot didn't know. He only knew that these humans, fairies, and elves knew the movements of the ogres. The gamers moved left and maneuvered right while they chatted non-stop. Then, they surrounded the ogres. Yes, they surrounded their prey. Lancelot had never encountered such a strange siege. The gamers chatted as they walked, and occasionally, they would lay down on the ground and then get up a minute later. After that, they surrounded the three ogres. The gamers didn't intend to remain quiet. A distant person shouted, "We have completed the siege here. Hurry up." The loud shouting alerted the ogres, who stood up and roared furiously. Though there were many gamers around, Lancelot was nervous, and his palms perspired profusely. He wasn't afraid of battle, but the enemies were 4 to 5 meter tall ogres who only appeared in books or legends as evil creatures. But now, they stood alive in front of him. As an honorable knight, he felt extremely hot-blooded when faced with such vile creatures. Warriors. He raised his sword and shouted to the gamers, "Our enemies are evil underworld creatures, so don't have mercy. Attack them bravely." And Lancelot didn't finish his sentence as the gamers had already charged out. Some gamers even started shouting, "Gosh, we're having a plot animation here," but the gamers on the opposite side have already started charging. "Don't do that, the equipment is mine." Equipment? The mission stated that the ogre's equipment would have to be submitted to Duchess Lilo. It's a pity, but we can't expect too much from the opening plot mission. The horde of gamers flooded towards the three ogres. Lilo gazed at 3 pieces of flesh that were covered with mosaic. If Sherlock had not informed her about the arrangement of the 3 ogres, she wouldn't suspect those things to be ogres. The gamers before Lilo were all quiet and motionless. Even Lancelot could feel the suppression. It felt as though he was being pressed down. Lancelot didn't know that it was Lilo's dominant aura. "Not bad," Lilo said to the gamer. "Prepare for an attack against the ogre fortress." Wait a moment. Duchess Lilo, if we don't prepare well and attack the ogres recklessly, we'll have no chance against them. It was a difficult battle against the 3 ogres. Lancelot was full of injuries. If the gamers hadn't used their bodies as shields, Lancelot would be dead. As a human, his strength was inferior to the evil creatures of the underworld. "I understand, but we will not be afraid, and we will defeat those ogres. That's all, don't say any more." Lilo raised her hand to stop Lancelot from speaking. Then, she returned to the small castle, leaving the 3 hamsters to speak to the gamers. "Prepare for battle. We'll prepare the teleport portal." They then followed Lilo and left. The gamers resumed their chattering while Lancelot was in a daze, recalling the previous events. His eyes lit up as he thought about Grand Priest Baldhead's words. These people were sent by God. They were representing the light races to destroy the evil of the underworld. A long black tail was wavering on a chair. 2 hind legs that were too short to reach the ground were swinging in the air, while a claw manipulated a mouse and clicked furiously to control a woman holding dual guns on a computer screen. Eggface looked at the screen, speaking from time to time. "Anytime, boss. I'm there. Shake it, baby. Yeah, baby." At this moment, a minimized web page emitted beeping sounds. Eggface mumbled to himself and stopped his computer game, then switched to the web page. A chat window popped out, and on the right side of the chat window were 2 chat names. Dungeon. Customer Service 001. The name below was Winter Lord Overseer. Winter Lord Overseer. Is anyone around? Customer service? Eggface took out a piece of paper, which was full of customer service responses. He searched through and copied the relevant parts. Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Yes, dearest. How can I help you? Winter Lord Overseer. Gosh. There's customer service. Are you faking it? Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Dearest, I am new to the job. How can I help you? Winter Lord Overseer. It's nothing much. I just wanted to check out the customer service. I'm surprised. I tried it out, and it's for real. Will you be annoyed since you're the only representative? Dungeon. Customer Service 001. No, dearest, I'm now doing on-the-job training, so I only work 1 hour per day. Winter Lord Overseer. I see. Dungeon. Customer Service 001. If there's nothing else, I will end the chat. If there are any problems, look for me again, dearest. Zoo 3, Zoo. Eggface closed the chat window in disdain, but just as he was about to resume his computer game, another series of beeping sounds were heard. Eggface switched to the chat window. It was another person, Dragon Raja number 1. Gosh, customer service? Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Yes, dearest. How can I help you? Dragon Raja number 1. It's nothing. I didn't manage to defeat the ogres. Is there a new ogre plot? Can you provide some equipment? Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Dearest, ogres are a high-level race that produces good quality equipment. Please work harder to defeat the ogres and obtain their equipment. Dragon Raja number 1. No, I just said that I can't defeat the ogres. Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Then go and get better equipment. Dragon Raja number 1. I have to defeat the ogres to obtain good equipment. Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Then go and defeat the ogres. Dragon Raja number 1. I can't defeat the ogres. Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Are you fooling me, dearest? I am ending the chat. Please clear your head before coming back. Hollow down pointing triangle. Who was that? Was that intentional? Eggface muttered to himself, feeling that it was impossible to understand. Right as he was about to resume his computer game, the chat window indicated a new chat. Noon. Wah, there's customer service. Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Zoo 3, Zoo dearest, how can I help you? Noon. Are you a little woman? Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Please do not ask questions unrelated to the game, dearest. Noon. Your reaction indicates that you're a woman. I love you, little woman. Dungeon. Customer Service 001. Dearest, if you are harassing me, I will end the chat. Noon. Miss. Eggface ended the chat decisively. What was that about? Were they that free? Why were they not playing games? Was chatting fun? Eggface was unable to understand. As he was about to resume his computer game, the beeping sounds were heard. Eggface shut off the computer and pushed the keyboard away. Tears welled up as he walked angrily to the nest at the corner, and he snorted indignantly and cried. Ooh. Chapter 353. First Contact. Z's Yaw. Sherlock opened the door of the Dungeon Lord main hall. Behind him were moving figures and chatting noises. Once the door was closed, it became quiet again. Sherlock took off his outer coat and cloak. After, magical wind and swirling water appeared from the air and circled the clothes, instantly cleaning the dusty apparel. The room was dark, but Sherlock heard constant breathing sounds. It was Eggface sleeping at the corner. He had a personal nest, but he preferred to sleep here. Was it due to the proximity of his computer? Lord Sherlock, your plan was successful. Eggface has reduced his time playing computer games. Before long, he may not even want to touch the computer. Bruce's voice rang out by Sherlock's ear. I got it. Sherlock nodded as Bruce said. The gamers gave many suggestions regarding problems in the game, and they are concerned about Victoria City having too few plots. Too few plots? What does that mean? Sherlock sat down and accessed the computer. It means that the NPCs aren't enthusiastic, especially Miss Lilo, who seems to be keeping to herself. She is unlike Lord Sherlock, who walks around to check. Miss Lilo is the kind who won't show her face for a few days. Though the three hamsters will shout at the gamers to work hard and go for overtime, it becomes dull after some time, Brew explained. The gamers tried to talk to Miss Lilo regarding this problem, but they were injured. They went to talk with Lilo? About what? Sherlock was taken aback. Brew said, there was no discussion, they were injured. Miss Lilo beat up the gamers who accused her. Though their injuries weren't serious, the chain reactions were severe. What happened? Did the gamers protest and stop working? Did they quit the game? Sherlock accessed the discussion forum and searched for the relevant complaint posts. No, when the gamers discovered that she would beat them up under certain circumstances, they felt excited and curious. They queued up to harass Miss Lilo, and many of them were injured. Sherlock didn't respond. He searched for the relevant posts and read through them. We discovered NPC Lilo's new gameplay. Under certain conditions, she'll beat you up. I saw some gamers being thrown out of the forest. It's so exciting. I brought along my whip. I wonder if Lilo will whip me. It's cool. The game will lose big time if the gamers are allowed to play it for free. I won't say any more. I'm going to the entrance of the castle to shout at Lilo and see if I can trigger a hidden plot. Are you a masochist? Why are you looking for a beating? Why did you not call for me to join you? You are such fools. Continue with your silly ways. This game is so realistic, so there will definitely be a hidden impression rating. All of you harassed Lilo every day, so the impression rating will be negative. She won't talk to you anymore. Though there wasn't much content, most of the gamers continued to play the game. They were focused on the coming battle with the ogres. As both factions would be involved in battling the ogres, the gamers discussed how they were going to beat the opposing faction. Many gamers posted their chatting history with the customer service representative, which was Eggface. There were hundreds of posts. Eggface chatted with that many customers? Sherlock pondered as Brew said, yes, the gamers were enthusiastic about Eggface. Before he reports for work, there will be a long queue on the forum waiting for him. I'm relieved to see so many playmates entertaining Eggface. He will have a memorable childhood, Sherlock said with satisfaction. Oh, it can be interpreted that way, Brew replied awkwardly. This is a challenge. This is definitely a challenge. A strong ogre who was tattooed from his bald head to the rest of his body held a huge axe. He stood in a house decorated with bones and said to the other ogres, those weak creatures thought they could fight against us. They even sent 100 clowns to fool us? We'll not let them off. That's right, we'll not let them off. We won't let them off. The surround ogres started shouting in agitation. Besides that, they attacked us secretly. Our guards at the entrance gate were all killed, and 3 of our ogre heroes were kidnapped. We'll never forget this insult. That's right, we'll never forget this insult. We'll never forget. The ogres shouted angrily. A few ogres walked out towards the tattooed ogre and spoke to him in a whisper. What? They constructed an outpost? They flew an airship over? The tattooed ogre screamed, prepared to set off. An ogre quickly whispered to the tattooed ogre, who was in shock as he said, what? They constructed 2 outposts? The gamers of Eternal Kingdom had constructed 2 outposts that were close by, and Lord Sherlock created a rune mana formation at one of the outposts. The gamers of Eternal Kingdom were puzzled about why Sherlock created another rune mana formation when there was already one on the airship. When they saw a human walk out of the teleport portal, they understood. DMN, we have to build a camp for the gamers of Victoria City? A gnome complained as he carried a large rock to create a simple wall around the camp. Previously, we had to draw out the boxes for our stalls. This isn't much, a gamer smiled and said. On a hill opposite them were a few humans carrying rocks to create their wall. In between the camps were various common underworld creatures, such as dire wolves and underground spiders. The main reason for their appearance were the gamers of Victoria City. The gamers of Victoria City were fond of the underworld creatures, thinking that they were monsters in the wild. Brew also assigned the appropriate mission. Mission title: Clearing the Base. Mission objective: Kill the monsters wandering outside the camp. Mission objectives: Dire wolves, 0 tenths. Underground spiders, 0 tenths. Mission reward: 200 bronze coins. And other similar missions. Most of the gamers performed their missions diligently, but some gamers were more concerned about the gamers from the opposing faction. Arthur, peasant, not wearing pants, Sylvanas, and burning chest hair moved warily towards the opposing faction's camp. Though there were many monsters between the 2 camps, they were no match for the 5 of them. Moreover, the area was large. As long as they remained hidden, they could evade most of the monsters. While Arthur and his companions were moving towards the Victoria City base camp, Victoria City gamers were moving towards the Eternal Kingdom base camp. Both parties met nearer to the Victoria City base camp. Arthur grasped the hilt of his sword and dipped the blade down as not wearing pants attempted to communicate with the human gamers. The rest of the gamers also chatted noisily, but the 2 factions discovered that they couldn't communicate with each other. One side was using the Underworld common language, while the other was using the Surface World common language. They couldn't communicate with each other. Though all of them spoke Chinese, they could only speak Chinese during mana incantations. During normal conversation, they were unable to speak Chinese. Since they couldn't communicate with speech, they used words. Not wearing pants started writing on the ground. Greetings, I'm not wearing pants. The other party replied, greetings, pants bro. We give our regards to you on behalf of Victoria City. From the look of it, the first contact was rather peaceful. But there were incidents of disharmony. In another part of the wilderness, the gnome called BT Kangren from Dragon Raja held a short bow in his hand. Behind him were a few Dragon Raja gamers, and before them was a group of human gamers from the Hoodlum Yoga Association. Their leader was a human called Great Centenarian, who was riding a white horse. The gnome, B.T. Cangren, was coveting Great Centenarian's horse. He focused on the horse rider and pulled the bowstring. With a swoosh sound, the arrow flew towards Great Centenarian. Chapter 354, Honor Points. The white horse of Great Centenarian fell to the ground. The arrow had penetrated its eye and brain, so it couldn't be saved. The leg of Great Centenarian was crushed underneath the white horse, the bones fractured. However, he couldn't feel any pain since he had adjusted the pain level to 0. He was overwhelmed by sadness as he stared at the dead horse and screamed in hopelessness. Goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men fearlessly charged out, as did the humans, fairies, and elves with their inferior equipment. There were reflections of blades and flashes of swords. Swoosh! Great Centenarian watched his arm fly off. Despite the loss of his arm, he tried his best to slash his sword, the greedy eyes of the gnome before him inflaming his anger. For Victoria City, Great Centenarian screamed in fury as he slashed his greatsword, but he was unable to stop a longsword from penetrating his breastplate. The gnome placed his face close to Great Centenarian and spoke hoarsely in the Underworld common language. In gnome language, he was saying, "Gosh! My horse! Why did I kill it? DMN." Great Centenarian could only scream at the gnome called B.T. Cangren. Before he could spit at B.T. Cangren, his strength faded, and he lost consciousness. 10 minutes later, there was a post on the forum titled, "This is War. I am Great Centenarian, a member of higher management in the Hoodlum Yoga Association Guild. I feel indignant about being ambushed by the scum of Eternal Kingdom. Picture. We are facing the same threat from the ogres, and we should be united, but you killed my horse. You dared to kill my horse. We, the Hoodlum Yoga Association, formally declare war on the Eternal Kingdom faction. We will form a team to kill off all of the darting birds. Wait for your deaths, as well as the deaths of your birds. We'll crush your houndheads. Killing members of the opposite faction will yield equipment. I know this because all of my equipment is gone. I won't say any more, as I am going into the game to rob them of their equipment." Besides the post by Great Centenarian, there were other posts that were highly provocative. The first contact between the two factions was like igniting a barrel of explosives, which ended in a massive explosion. They are a warmongering race. Are they also that aggressive in the Otherworld? Sherlock asked curiously as he looked at the discussion forum that was filled with accusations and declarations of war. In the Otherworld, they have exterminated millions of animals and conducted racial massacres. They have had 2 world wars, and then with 2 explosions, their history became a history of war. They enjoy war, so it's not too far off to describe them as warlike, Brew replied quickly. But most importantly, in this game, they are free from all restraints. Instead of sitting down and negotiating or holding hands merrily, they prefer to hack, kill, and pillage. This kind of brutal game is much more attractive. Sherlock nodded. Yes, from the large number of war-themed computer games, they do seem to like conflict. He then said, let them have more opportunities for entertainment. It will save me some money too. I will provide an avenue, one that is similar to an arena to promote their conflict. A place they can hone their combat skills and entertain themselves at the same time. It's perfect. They can submit any looted equipment to us for rewards since they can't use their enemy's equipment anyway. Then, we'll transport them back to the surface world and put them on sale. Let them construct a fortified outpost before launching an attack on the ogres. The mission will follow the plan that we discussed before, Sherlock ordered. Brew quickly replied, Lord Sherlock, your plan is flawless. Eggface was behind them typing furiously. He was chatting with the gamers who were complaining or giving suggestions. Eggface frowned, deeply focused as he typed on the keyboard. He had been working diligently for the past few days. Sherlock was pleased. He felt he had enriched Eggface's childhood. Lancelot felt that he was going crazy. He had agreed to Duchess Lilo's mission to follow the gamers through the teleport portal to visit the Underworld. He saw legendary strange creatures like dire wolves, underground spiders, the green-skinned goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. He could even hear the roars of the ogres coming from the large fortress. Lancelot felt that he was insane. Ah, this is miraculous, it's God's gift. Grand Priest Baldhead looked impassioned as he stood before Lancelot. He gazed at Lancelot and said, it's God's will to let them destroy evil. We are counting the days to the end of the devil. Grand Priest Baldhead muttered and prayed before leaving. Lancelot could no longer treat Grand Priest Baldhead like a nutcase. He could no longer rebuke Grand Priest Baldhead's words after witnessing the half-naked humans, fairies, and elves charging at the opposite outpost while screaming things like, "Kill Eternal Kingdom," for the equipment, and, "For the Holy Lord," for the unified quadratic equations. Perhaps it really was God's will. Peasant held a shield and screamed as he charged at the humans. As a Houndhead man, his constitution was slightly inferior to humans, but his equipment and rich combat experience gave him an edge. The enemy was a female human armed with a bow and a quiver full of arrows, though she wasn't wearing any armor since she was worried about losing her equipment if she perished. She released an arrow with her eyes closed, making no attempt to aim. Since she was being targeted by one of the famous five, Peasant, she had to flee immediately. Shooting the arrow was only to slow down Peasant's pace. It was of no use, though, because a gnome assassin covered with gray cloth was laying an ambush behind her. When the female human ran, she saw the moving gray cloth and the green words, "Valiant Burning Chesthair," and "Pioneer Alliance." Behind her, Peasant was hot on her heels, so she had nowhere to run. She shouted at Burning Chesthair in the Surface World Common Language, DMN. "Chesthair, are you trying to crack me up? I'm going to capture a screenshot and post it on the forum." Burning Chesthair couldn't understand what she was blabbering about. He held his breath, about to execute a series of stealth attacks. He grabbed some dust in his hand as he peered out from two small holes. He noticed she was coming closer and aiming at him, which meant that he had been discovered. Burning Chesthair tossed his gray cloth while dodging to his left as she released her arrow. That was her blind spot, so she couldn't possibly hit. Peef! An arrow landed on Burning Chesthair's chest. The female archer didn't expect to hit the bullseye. The arrow was slanted and off target when she released it, but Burning Chesthair seemed to have caught the arrow when he rolled. Burning Chesthair frowned. This female archer wasn't as simple as she looked. "Lightning dash!" he shouted as he grasped his two daggers and charged at the archer. While she was frantically reloading her bow, Burning Chesthair threw his gray cloth over and shouted, "Blinding move." Burning Chesthair leapt into the air and elbowed the archer in the chest. Neck twist. He landed on the ground. To prevent her from escaping, he lifted his leg to the height of her knees and said, "Leg kick." Then, he rolled on the ground to her exposed side and stabbed at her. Backstabbing. Good. It was his final move. Burning Chesthair focused his attention, grasping his daggers tightly. He aimed at her kidney and was about to. Swoosh. An arrow penetrated the throat of the female archer, who struggled before collapsing to the ground. Then, her body disintegrated into mana particles before vanishing. "What are you doing, Chesthair? Why the drama? Are there such skills? I haven't heard of them before." An ugly gnome, Sylvanas, who was dressed in a heroic ranger costume, stood on a nearby slope and said to Burning Chesthair, "Your drama is giving me chills." "Wah, Vanas, you stole my prize." Burning Chesthair waved his daggers and protested against Sylvanas. Arthur walked over and checked the short bow and arrows on the ground. Not Wearing Pants glanced at the loot and said, "Ah, it's ordinary white equipment. The quality is trash. Victoria City has just started developing. What can you expect for their equipment?" Sylvanas put away her short bow. As she walked over, she was befuddled and shouted, "Gosh." Honor points? Chapter 355. Tattooed Ogre. The ogre troops carried various weapons and shouted crude language as they marched past the exit of the fortress. Lychee was a strong ogre who had loved to eat the toughest clay and drink the filthiest water since young. His favorite tidbits were melamine, Sudan red, plasticizer, leanness-enhancing agent, swelling agent, and waste oil. Because he ate well, his body was very strong, especially his right hand. Being single, he had enough time to focus on his combat skills. His right hand wielded heavy weapons, so it was twice as thick as his left hand. The other ogres were envious of his physique. Lychee's eyes were firm, long used to such envious and jealous gazes. While he could depend on his looks to earn a living, he wanted to prove his capability. As the captain of the ogre troops, he was ordered to lead a 500-strong battalion to attack the recently constructed outposts near their fortress. Lychee was full of confidence, having planned in great detail for the battle. He wanted to eat all of his enemies. The reason the ogres didn't go all out against the two outposts was that they were complacent and didn't have a clear strategic goal except to occupy territories and expand rapidly. They wanted more types of underworld creatures for their meals, that was all. Lychee set off towards one of the outposts with his battalion of ogres. All the wild beasts avoided the ogres, fleeing in haste once they smelled their pungent scent. Lychee didn't know and wasn't interested to know when these wild beasts appeared. When he saw a few scattered goblins surrounding a dire wolf warily, he laughed. What were they doing? Was it a joke? How dare they set up an outpost in ogre territory? Were they offering themselves as meals? No, these fellows didn't have much flesh. Lychee laughed hysterically as he recalled how the 100 defectors had disintegrated into mana particles before vanishing. Kill them all, Lychee ordered his ogres. The goblins that were fighting the dire wolf noticed the charging ogres and fled immediately, though they weren't afraid. Instead, they were smiling merrily. When Lychee got close to them, he heard them talking. Oh gosh, my goodness, the monsters are attacking. DMN, why are you running so fast? If I can run faster than my friend, I won't have to die. DMN, ha 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 ha, shouldn't we go through thick and thin together? Lychee felt a surge of anger rush into his head. Were they trying to humiliate him? The battalion of 500 ogres attacked the outpost. There were no tall walls to protect the gamers, but their numbers had doubled. Though most goblins didn't have much combat power, it wasn't much of a problem for them to harass the ogres as cannon fodder. Lychee was killing with pleasure. These weak underworld creatures were goblins with poor armor. Even the gnomes with superior equipment couldn't fend off the overwhelming power of the ogres. Soon, Lychee and his battalion met with trouble. Flashes of sacred light illuminated the crowd. A naked goblin wielding a huge hammer was in the lead, his body surrounded by blinding light. That was sacred light. Since when did goblins have sacred light? In front of Lychee, an ogre's head was crushed by the goblin's sacred knight, and a bloody mess splattered all over the place. The goblin roared loudly, "For our belief. Technology is the most powerful." Fortunately, this insane goblin's sacred knight lost his sacred light after his raving. Lychee lifted his gigantic mace with his thick right arm and crushed the goblin in a second. Another creature held a bladder that was tied to an arrow, and he shut his eyes as he released the arrow. The bladder on the arrow had a fuse that ignited and exploded with a loud booming sound. That insane archer killed himself in the explosion. The outpost became a chaotic mess. Lychee discovered that the ogres were dwindling but that the underworld creatures didn't diminish in numbers. Retreat, quickly retreat, we're retreating to the fortress. Lychee shouted loudly in an attempt to rally the remaining ogres. He had underestimated the numbers of these weak creatures. They were like fleas that infested the whole area. But it was all right, he had figured them out. When he attacked again, it would be their doomsday. Though Lychee met with a setback, he was still confident. He raised his strong right arm and swept the weak underworld creatures away like he was cleaning trash. That was when, in the distance, he noticed a swirling dust storm. A group of humans, fairies, and elves were charging towards him under the lead of an armored knight. The armored knight was Lancelot, who was excommunicated but firmly believed in a knight's honor. When he discovered the ogres fighting with the evil underworld creatures at the outpost, he understood instinctively that it was the best chance to exterminate the threats. Hence he led the gamers of Victoria City in the attack. For the freedom of humans and the light races. Fight to the last moment. Charge! Lancelot screamed as they rapidly approached the outpost. The Victoria City army joined in the fray like a torrential wave. Kill all of their horses. Weak calves of Dragon Raja, doom is upon you. Arthur is mine. Shirley, find Shirley. Kill the boss. Silly dude. The commander of Eternal Kingdom's outpost at Sighing Wilderness is Brainiac. Then kill Brainiac. What Sighing Wilderness? Where did you get that name? Wah! Chaotic shoutings pierced the air. In the middle of a room, a fire crackled noisily. A tattooed ogre sat in a chair and broke the armrest with his fist as he shouted, "What?" Lychee's battalion was annihilated, and Lychee died in battle? The other ogres started talking, but the noise stopped when the tattooed ogre gestured for them to keep quiet. The ogre adjutant continued to report, "The outpost had greater numbers than we expected." Lychee's battalion was about to retreat when they were trapped by a charging horde of humans, fairies, and elves. They allied with the races of the surface world? The tattooed ogre looked at his adjutant in shock. The adjutant said, "In the group of humans, there's even a grand priest." "What, a grand priest joined them?" "Those gnomes were able to endure the presence of a grand priest," the tattooed ogre shouted in astonishment. "I don't think they are of the same faction, because when they fought with Captain Lychee, they also fought against each other. It was a brutal fight." The tattooed ogre was in deep thought for a long time. Then, he raised his head and asked, bewildered, "There's a rebellion?" "No, chief, I feel that they don't belong to the same faction." "Yes, chief, that's a higher possibility," the other ogres agreed and commented. The tattooed ogre nodded and was convinced. He had to consider how to deal with his enemies. While the ogres were talking, they discovered a strong black aura suppressing them to the point that they were unable to breathe. A pair of yellow eyes appeared from the darkness and edged closer. "I thought you had the capability to deal with those troublemakers, but your strength is only so-so. Who are you?" An ogre walked forward and shouted at the figure in the dark. Another ogre threw a mace directly at him, but it didn't hit him. Instead, the mace crashed into the wall with a loud thud. The tattooed ogre stood up and relaxed his shoulders, revealing powerful muscles. He spoke in a low voice at the threatening dark figure that made him uneasy, saying, "No matter who you are, this is ogre territory. It's my..." Before the tattooed ogre could finish, a dark shadow engulfed him like a tornado, swirling above his head before entering his body through his orifices, eyes, nose, ears, mouth, and even the buttocks. The terrifying scene caused all of the other ogres to back up and shout in fear. The entire body of the tattooed ogre was covered with dark shadows, and his eyes became yellow pupils. He walked 2 steps forward in tandem with the decadent dark attack, and a dung beetle that passed by his toes convulsed and collapsed to the ground. I am the plague bearer, Polio. Chapter 356. Entering the instance dungeon. Dragonborn crept behind a hill slope, followed by several humans with poor quality equipment. "Did you see the dire wolf ahead?" Dragonborn turned his body and asked the members of the For That Night with Sherlock guild who were behind him. Dragonborn was referring to a dire wolf that was sniffing around behind the slope. Those human gamers nodded. "You will only need 2 gamers with weapon level 1 to deal with such a creature. First of all, you'll need a shield." Dragonborn raised his shield and said, "Remember, it doesn't matter what weapons you're using or whether you're using mana skills, always bring a shield to absorb damage." Dragonborn grasped his short sword tightly and said, "Attract the attack of the dire wolf using your shield, then counterattack. Don't be greedy for damage. We don't have healing potions, so if you're bitten, you'll have to kill yourself to revive. Don't be greedy for damage." Dragonborn reminded them many times and said, "The defense of the dire wolf is poor, unlike the underground spider, and normal weapons will deal fatal blows since its body is full of vulnerabilities. Let me demonstrate." Dragonborn stood up and moved slowly towards the dire wolf. It noticed him and gave off a low, threatening growl before charging towards him viciously. Dragonborn raised his shield to fend off its brainless attack. While the dire wolf was recovering from its attack, he thrust his sword forward. The sword penetrated deeply into the dire wolf, and Dragonborn lifted his weapon, flipping the dire wolf to the ground. After convulsing and moaning for a short while, the dire wolf became motionless. It was dead. Awesome, awesome. The entire process was smooth and slick. This game is really hardcore, it's awesome. While the gamers of Victoria City were chatting, on the other side of the slope, a group of gnomes was charging over. A gamer detected the gnomes and alerted the rest, who panicked and fled towards their outpost. Dragonborn also fled, not even having the chance to bring along his loot. Before long, they arrived at the Victoria outpost. The gnomes had no intention to pursue any further as they would be killing themselves and giving up their equipment. Similar incidents occurred throughout the wilderness. The gamers of Eternal Kingdom gained the upper hand due to their superior equipment and combat experience. While the ogres in Eternal Kingdom were engaged in a chaotic battle, Lancelot led the gamers of Victoria City to attack. They were annihilated. The gamers of Victoria City had to risk their lives to carry Lancelot back safely. Within a short period of time, the gamers of Victoria City were unable to compete with the gamers of Eternal Kingdom. They had to develop their combat power while avoiding conflict. Fortunately, the Underworld monsters were closer to the Victoria outpost, and the gamers of Eternal Kingdom had to fight the monsters at the entrance of the Victoria outpost. Therefore, if there was a conflict between the two factions, based on the advantage of a closer revival point, the gamers of Victoria City had an advantage. Even if they couldn't win the fight, they could flee to their outpost. It's pathetic, we're being beaten by those green-skinned creatures, Take a Spear Hit said angrily, patting his thigh while the gnomes retreated. It's only temporary. According to experiments by many gamers, based on the attributes of the races, the humans, fairies, and elves of Victoria City are better than the goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. The inferior elves have greater mana affinity and capacity than the houndhead men. Some gamers tried out the wind-related mana skills and found that fairies are able to release twice the number of spells as the houndhead men. Sealhead Ling Chong chose the beautiful elf race and equipped himself with a shield, bow, and an axe. He only managed to kill friendlies with his bow instead of monsters. Even with Brew's aiming assistance, the situation didn't improve. Wait, where did you get the statistics? Take a Spear Hit asked in surprise. From the discussion forum. There are many related experiments in the discussion forum. If you do a search, you'll find them. Take a Spear Hit lay down to rest. He was going to the discussion forum to study the strategy guides. Dragonborn wasn't bothered by the statistics. He had to make use of the time to train other guild members into competent fighters. In the captain's cabin of the airship, which was moored at the Eternal Kingdom outpost outside the Ogre Fortress, a bed was placed in the middle of the cabin. Sherlock looked tired as he lay on the bed, only covered with a thin blanket. Lord Sherlock, your plan is effective. The death toll of Eternal Kingdom's gamers has breached 100,000. Pardon my frankness, but I'm worried about your health. Brew's voice rang by Sherlock's ear. Don't worry, if it's more than 100,000, I'll have 2 million magic stones in my account. I can still work. Sherlock sat up and pondered before saying, if there are too many deaths, Nicholas may not have the money to pay. I'll have to consider long-term gains. Assign the mission, Brew. Game time is over, it's time to work. We'll follow our chosen plot. I'll send a letter to Lilo. Yes, Lord Sherlock. Sherlock sent a burning letter to Lilo before he walked out of the airship and proceeded to the Eternal Kingdom outpost. Whether the gamers were at Eternal Kingdom, outside the Ogre Fortress, or in Winterfell, they received the same mission. Mission title: Attack the Ogre Fortress. Mission description: We have completed our preparation. Prepare to attack the Ogre Fortress. Assemble at the Eternal Kingdom outpost with Sherlock before the final invasion. Mission objective: Follow Lord Sherlock and invade the Ogre Fortress. Eliminate the Ogre threat. Mission reward: Ogre's equipment, based on capability. The gamers of Victoria City received the same mission, but they would assemble with Duchess Lilo. The gamers assembled at their respective outposts. When Sherlock arrived at the assembly area, there were thousands of gamers. Warriors of Eternal Kingdom, Sherlock shouted loudly, the Ogre Fortress is right before us. The battle will be fraught with danger, but we won't cower. We will die today, but our spirit will be remembered by all Underworld creatures. Warriors, let's set off. The airship slowly rose up while Yoda gave a thumbs up to Sherlock. There were tens of mana engineering apprentices on board the airship, all of whom were familiar with its operation. The gamers cheered wildly when the airship flew up, but before the cheering ended, the airship wavered violently and emitted rumbling noises. Immediately after, it crashed. Boom! The bow of the airship collided with the ground, landing on its side and creating a large cloud of dust and sand. It was fortunate there were no explosions, but the airship couldn't fly anymore. Sherlock looked back at the airship and then gazed at the Ogre Fortress. Frowning, he said, it seems that the enemy has attacked us first. Warriors, we are unable to obtain support from the Eternal Kingdom's Air Force. Follow me, we have to take down the Ogre Fortress. Sherlock shouted loudly, and the chattering gamers charged towards the Ogre Fortress. Many gamers went ahead of Sherlock to clear the monsters and scout for ogres. Lord Sherlock, Bruce said to Sherlock with concern, it was a large area of mana negation that disabled the airship's core. Is there such a powerful entity inside the Ogre Fortress? Previously, no, but now there is. How's Yoda? Sherlock was composed. It was as though he was already mentally prepared. Brainiac and the gamers have rescued Yoda, and Brainiac is now healing him. From his injuries, it's not dangerous, Brew replied quickly. That's good. Sherlock nodded and looked at the Victoria outpost to his side. They had also set off towards the ogre fortress. Chapter 357, Plague Bearer Polio. The Victoria City army assembled within half an hour. At that time, Duchess Lilo started the plot, saying, "Occupy the ogre fortress." Set off. It was a short plot animation like before. Wait a moment, Duchess. The Underworld troops are advancing towards the ogre fortress. I even saw a superior devil. Though the citizens of Victoria City can revive miraculously, they can't defeat the army of the devil. We should let the Underworld army and the ogres weaken each other before we attack. If we go now, we'll meet our doom. Lancelot was covered in injuries, but he endured the pain and tried to stop Duchess Lilo's order. The main objective is to destroy the ogres. Let's set off. Lilo abandoned Lancelot and led the gamers towards the ogre fortress. The gamers comforted Lancelot and said, "Don't worry, the dogs of Eternal Kingdom can't defeat Duchess Lilo. She killed Samael with one blow while Shirley fought with him for half a day. Our leader is a powerful figure. Yes, if we attack the ogre fortress together, they won't allow a faction war. Perhaps, Eternal Kingdom's army will stop us from interfering. I'm worried. What if Eternal Kingdom's army charges at us? Are you mentally ill? Why are you comforting the NPC?" Lancelot looked in a daze at these chatting gamers. They seemed to know some inside information. Were those underworld creatures from Eternal Kingdom? Was that the name of a dungeon? Duchess Lilo killed Samael? Was she hiding her actual identity as an angel? The information was overwhelming. Dragonborn led his guild members and traveled in the middle of the Victoria contingent, which marched in a disorderly manner. Some gamers hopped and jumped around, while a few gamers went forward to scout. There were those who fell behind while they chatted as well. What mattered was that they arrived at the ogre fortress. The Eternal Kingdom and Victoria contingents marched towards the ogre fortress from 2 outposts. During the journey, they didn't encounter any enemy attacks. There were no ogres on the fortress walls, and the entire fortress was dead quiet. What's up? Didn't the system load properly? Take a spear hit stood at the base of the tall walls while other gamers shouted loudly. Ogres, come and meet your doom. We're here, ogres. Open the gate, open the gate, open the gate. Lousy game producers. There were no responses from within the ogre fortress. As the gamers used various weapons to knock on the walls, Lilo also walked to the wall. A pike with a helix shaft appeared in her hand, and she thrust it into the wall and cut out a huge hole with a loud explosion. Go in, Lilo ordered. Charge, look for Shirley. The tramps of Eternal Kingdom have entered. Gosh, the plot animation was too short. Wah, the gamers shouted as they charged through the crevice. Lilo stood her ground while the 3 hamsters beside her sniffed the air uneasily. Big Boss frowned and said to Lilo, "My lady, the scent in the air is evil. Something's not right." Second Boss nodded and said, "The mana in the air is different. This is a mana negation area. Sherlock's airship crashed because the airship core was disabled when it entered the mana negation area. The enemy must be wary of the magic cannons on the airship," Big Boss speculated. "The food inside is bad." Fat Otaku shook his head firmly and said, "But I'm greedy for food." Lilo hugged her arms and pondered before saying, "The mana negation area is child's play and won't have any effect on Sherlock and me. Our lady is invincible." Immediately after Big Boss shouted excitedly, there was a series of bellows from the ogre fortress. It sounded like wild beasts were being released from a cage. Sherlock stood in front of the Grand Ogre Fortress, listening to the bellows. The gamers beside Sherlock were given a fright, but many courageous gamers dashed inside enthusiastically. The main gate of the Ogre Fortress was opened. Inside, there were no defenses, and it looked empty. The gamers entered unhindered and followed Sherlock into its depths. The paths in the Ogre Fortress weren't complex since it was previously used as a Winterfell border fortress. Because of that, the interior couldn't be made into a labyrinth. After walking down a long corridor, Sherlock led the gamers to the deepest part of the Ogre Fortress, where a throne was located. On the throne was a bald and tattooed ogre whose eyes were emitting yellow light. He was alone. "I was exiled for 1,000 years and imprisoned for another 1,000 years. I regained my freedom, and you dare to intrude into my territory. You're seeking doom." The bald and tattooed ogre leapt high up and smashed his mace on the ground, the impact creating a tremor in the hall. "You can't stop me. The entire sighing wilderness will become the ogre's breeding ground. Ogres will rule the world. With the shout of the bald and tattooed ogre, the eyes of every ogre glimmered with yellow light as they surrounded the gamers. Warriors, resist those ogres. I'll deal with their leader. Sherlock shouted and charged towards the bald and tattooed ogre, who fled through a small door by the side. Only the gamers were left in the ogre fortress to fight with the ogres. Sherlock pursued the tattooed ogre closely until the ogre escaped into one of the rooms. Sherlock rushed to the entrance of the room. When he saw how dark it was, he proceeded slowly into the room. A pair of shiny eyes fixed their gaze on Sherlock, and the master of the eyes asked him, "Lord Sherlock, what drink would you like? Bloody chrysanthemum tea?" A fat hamster asked him this as he brewed a cup of tea. "I'll have a cup of tea." Sherlock walked into the room and sat down. Another hamster lit up a lamp to illuminate the room. The bald and tattooed ogre that fled just now was inside the room, as was a young lady who sat on a sofa. She was fallen angel Lilo. Behind Lilo was a fat hamster who stared at the ogre and salivated until his chest hair was wet. "Sherlock, I feel that before you drink your tea, you should explain the situation." Lilo looked at Sherlock and asked, "Why are these ogres controlled by you? Didn't we agree to make this a troops training ground?" "Ah, I have to explain from a jailbreak incident." Sherlock sat down, and Big Boss passed the brewed bloody chrysanthemum tea to him. Sherlock sipped the tea and said, "Polio escaped from Bancasia." "That's right, he's the ogre right in front of you. Or I should say he controlled this ogre. Is Polio the 69th devil god of Michelangelo's 72 devil gods? The plague bearer?" Lilo looked at the ogre, who stood at the side. She frowned and asked, "Aren't the 72 devil gods of Michelangelo superior devils? Since when did they become ogres?" "Miss Fallen Angel, please don't be mistaken, I'm not a filthy ogre. It's merely a mental control technique," the ogre said in a hoarse voice. "Where is your body?" Lilo asked. "Polio doesn't have a physical body," Sherlock said. "He can exist in any form. Previously, he was in charge of intelligence gathering, infiltration, subversion, and conducting Trojan horse operations." "So, you're the great devil Michelangelo and not the devil Sherlock that studied with me for 90 years? Lilo frowned and looked at Sherlock. "No, I can explain." Sherlock made a hand gesture to the ogre, Polio. The ogre leader collapsed to the ground, then a black weapon seeped out from the cracks in the room. "I just became Michelangelo recently. Do you remember that I obtained Michelangelo's metal chest? I opened it and obtained all of Michelangelo's relics. Now, I am like the boss of Michelangelo's 72 devil gods." Sherlock explained briefly and said, "After I came to know of Polio's jailbreak, I started planning for all of the events at the Ogre Fortress. As one of the 72 devil gods, he would definitely look for me. How could I miss such an opportunity?" "What opportunity? Invasion of the Heavenly Kingdom?" Lilo asked in anticipation. "No, I can earn more magic stones and set up a new instance dungeon," Sherlock said with a smile. Chapter 358. Plot of Ogre Fortress. "Wait, you said that you obtained Michelangelo's relics and that one of the 72 devil gods, Polio, looked for you, but you only want to use the chance to make magic stones?" Lilo's tone was raised higher. "Don't be mistaken, I'm not only thinking of making money. It's not a good time to let Polio show himself since he has just escaped from prison. Besides, even though he treats me like his master, Michelangelo, I'm not really his master. Polio is a dangerous creature, so before we figure him out and learn to control him completely, it's better to put him here to train the soldiers," Sherlock said seriously. It didn't seem like he was lying. If he didn't have a physical body, how was he imprisoned? Lilo hit the nail on the head, but Sherlock quickly replied, "Mana skills are developing at a rapid pace. Even souls can be pulled back from the spirit world and placed into corpses. What does he mean by being imprisoned for 1,000 years and seeking doom?" "Oh, that was Polio's story. The citizens like this kind of story. As you know, adventure, plot, and saving the world. A group of self-centered humans who are just training will develop fatigue. If a plot is included, the entertainment value will be doubled. I'm trying to improve their training efficiency." Lilo nodded at Sherlock's explanation and said, "If that's the case, carry out your plan. I'm going back to rest." Lilo stood up, looking tired as she said, "If you let them die so frequently, it's not good for the health. Let's go, Big Boss, Second Boss, Fat Otaku." Lilo left the room, and Big Boss and Second Boss followed behind as they dragged Fat Otaku, who was salivating while looking at the ogre. After Lilo and the hamsters left, the bald and tattooed ogre stood up again, saying in a low voice, "Master, let's go through the subsequent plot." Sherlock looked at the ogre and said. Dragonborn led his guild members deeper into the ogre fortress. There were other Victoria City gamers around them. After the gamers entered the ogre fortress, they lost contact with Lilo and the three hamsters, though none of the gamers saw the plot animation that made them lose contact. A group of ogres rushed out, their eyes shimmering with yellow light as they shouted and swung their weapons menacingly. The Victoria City gamers retreated. Though they had casualties, it wasn't serious. The ogres seemed to be herding them towards a location rather than attacking them. Dragonborn discovered that it was all because of the plot. When Dragonborn and the gamers retreated to a great hall, they saw a group of green-skinned creatures being herded here. They spoke in the Underworld common language. "Gosh, why are the silly dudes of Victoria City here? What should we do? Should we attack the ogres or kill the Victorians? Of course we kill the Victorians. The ogres can rot slowly, but the Victorian dogs have to die." Wah! The gamers of Victoria City couldn't understand the gamers of Eternal Kingdom and vice versa. The Victoria City gamers spoke in the surface world common language. "Gosh, it's Arthur. I saw Arthur. We're done for. We were having fun challenging the instance dungeon, so why did it become a faction war? Perhaps it's a plot requirement. Don't panic, they don't have health bars." Wah! The two factions clashed together. Their names were red, but they couldn't attack each other as there were no health bars. Though the gamers were agitated by the opposing faction, they were all surrounded. It looked like they would be killed unless there was a redeeming plot. The ogres stopped their attacks, and Sherlock was covered in blood as he fought his way through them. The gamers weren't sure if Sherlock was injured, but his cloak was badly tattered. The gamers were very excited to see him. "Sherlock, you can't escape this time." Compared to Sherlock's pathetic appearance, the bald and tattooed ogre looked pristine. Though the gamers would like to kill the ogre leader, they were restrained. The gamers of both factions had entered plot animation mode. "Your plan will never succeed. The warriors of Eternal Kingdom and Victoria City will stop you. And I." Sherlock inhaled deeply, and his mana built up rapidly as he said, "Will use all of my power to stop you." Sherlock said to the gamers behind him, "Warriors, take this opportunity to escape, and don't sacrifice yourselves for nothing. As long as we're alive, we'll have a chance for revenge." It was obvious that the story had become a great escape. Though there were many gamers, the revival point was quite a distance away. On top of that, the combat power of the gamers was far inferior to the ogres. After all, even the elite gamers had only trained for a few months. Their lack of combat power made it easy for the ogres to herd the gamers in a certain direction. Sherlock led the way for the gamers, who had no choice but to follow him. When the gamers deviated from the path, they were cut down by the surrounding ogres, who were coming in endless hordes. The bald and tattooed ogre was at the side, commanding them. "Suppress them. Don't let them escape. Kill all of them. Sherlock, you deserve to die. You can't escape today." The ogre leader merely shouted without doing anything like a big boss. Sherlock led the gamers to the exit of the ogre fortress. After pushing back several waves of ogres, he finally led the gamers to the outside of the ogre fortress. Just when they were about to flee, the bald and tattooed ogre blocked their path. "Your luck has run out, Sherlock. I will personally cut you into pieces," the tattooed ogre shouted in malice. "Evil Polio, you will never succeed. I'll stop you. The warriors will stop you," Sherlock shouted, and blinding light erupted from his body. He charged towards Polio, who manifested a great deal of mana and smashed his mace at Sherlock. Opposing mana collided and gave off a huge explosion and other mystical lighting effects. There were explosions everywhere, leaving the gamers gaping in shock. They wanted to help Sherlock, but they had already entered plot animation mode. In this battle, Sherlock finally gained the upper hand. In the final explosion, Polio's body was covered in a bloody mosaic. He panted as he backed up while holding his mace, then said to Sherlock, "Sherlock, you can't win. I'll definitely kill you next time." Polio and the surrounding ogres retreated like a receding wave. The gamers of Eternal Kingdom and Victoria City were bewildered. "Warriors of Eternal Kingdom, the crisis is larger than I thought. The Void Army is supporting the ogres, and the source of the threat is getting closer. We have to make proper plans. Return to our outpost, I'll wait for you there. And gamers of Victoria City. Your Duchess was almost killed by polio and should have returned to Victoria City. Though we are of different factions, we have a common goal, to defeat the ogres and the Void Army. I have no power to ask you to fight. Go back to your Duchess, she will make the final decision. Sherlock walked slowly back to the Eternal Kingdom outpost. The plot ended, and the gamers of the two factions looked at each other. Some gamers tried to return to the Ogre Fortress, but they couldn't. A notice appeared before them. The Ogre Fortress will be opened soon. Please refer to the official discussion forum. There was going to be a new battle campaign scenario at the Ogre Fortress. There could even be an instance dungeon. Since it was closed, there was no way to explore it. Each faction would have their own plots. The gamers of Eternal Kingdom had to return to their outpost and find Sherlock to continue the plot, while the gamers of Victoria City had to find Duchess Lilo to continue the plot. The two factions discovered that they could attack each other after leaving the boundary of the Ogre Fortress. In the wilderness, a large-scale faction war erupted. Chapter 359. Ogres Version Preparation. After the gamers experienced the opening plot at the Ogre Fortress, they followed the plot notice and returned back to their outposts. The gamers of Eternal Kingdom received the subsequent mission. Mission title: Start of the Ogre War. Mission description: the ogres rallied under the banner of polio and had the dark power of the Void Army. Our all-out attack on the ogres was thwarted, but we will not give up. There is hope in the world. Be strong, warriors. Mission objectives: excavate in the dungeon, 0/60ths of a minute. Submit organic materials, 0/10ths. Additional objectives: submit war materials, magic stones, 0/10ths, can submit repeatedly. The gamers didn't know and dared not ask why they had to submit magic stones for the mission. Fortunately, it was only an additional objective and not a compulsory objective. Only extremely rich gamers could perform this objective, like Arthur. A table was placed at the entrance of the Dungeon Lord main hall, and Eggface sat behind it. He wrote in a large book and said, submission of 10 magic stones. Are you Arthur? Let me register your name. You have a reward. Your opinion points are increased by 10. Wait a moment, what is the meaning of opinion points? Not Wearing Pants, who accompanied Arthur, asked curiously. That's my favorable opinion of you. I'll remember your name, chat with you more, and help you become a Houndhead man, Eggface said as he deposited the magic stones into a magic stone card designated by Sherlock. Yes, what's your name? I forgot. Eggface looked at Not Wearing Pants. I didn't submit the magic stones, it was him. Not Wearing Pants pointed at Arthur, who said without emotion, Arthur. I'm Arthur. Oh, Arthur, thank you for the magic stones. You may go now. Next, Eggface muttered, all of the gnomes look the same. I have no choice. Arthur, why is it such a sissy name? Not Wearing Pants was angry, but what could he do? He could only create a post on the official website to protest and file a complaint with customer service. However, Black Dragon was the only customer service representative, and there was only an hour of work time. The gamers would take note of the time and harass the customer service representative. Not Wearing Pants wasn't sure if he would have the chance to complain, but he was going to try anyway. Before that, they had to complete their mission. The chain mission was a series of continuous missions that involved the accumulation of materials, working at the Winterfell factory for 2 hours, excavating the dungeon, logging trees, and mining and transporting ores and other materials to the crossroad of the surface world exit. Basically, it was to repeat the daily mission, followed by the weekly mission. The gamers worked diligently to complete the mission so that they could explore the Ogre Fortress and unlock the Ogre's plot. It was quite similar over at Victoria. The only difference was that they didn't have to submit magic stones. Even if they were required to submit magic stones, they couldn't afford them. Sherlock wasn't idle, and he didn't play computer games. He was creating the instance dungeon entrance. Lord Sherlock, have you been playing World of Warcraft too much? Why are you copying the design of World of Warcraft? Brew asked as he gazed at an instance dungeon entrance that had a swirling vortex. No, how can I be copying it? I'm merely using it as a reference. World of Warcraft isn't the only game to have this instance dungeon entrance design. Online Swordsman 3 Feet, Final Fantasy, and Dragon Nest all have similar designs. I researched numerous online games before coming out with the detailed plan of the ogre's plot. Sherlock looked at the constructed door, the swirling vortex, and the mana special effects in the middle of the door. They were provided by his good friend Professor Bacon. Lord Sherlock. A skeleton walked towards Sherlock. It was Professor Bacon. He said, "We completed your request and installed 200 teleport portals at the main gate of the fortress and at the part of the fortress wall that has a crevice." Lord Sherlock. Why are you installing these items at the fortress? I noticed that the design of the teleport portal at Spectre College is very good. I intend to set up a new entertainment outlet and use it. Thank you for your help. Yes, the price is. Professor Bacon quickly said, "What price? You've helped Spectre College so much. The graduation rate for the Level A examination is 100%, and everyone is singing the praises of the graduates, as the current graduates are of higher quality from the previous graduates. Spectre College gained in terms of both reputation and profit. Without your help, we wouldn't be able to find so many combatants in these peaceful times. We should be thanking Lord Sherlock. So, just take these dual teleport portals as tokens of appreciation from Spectre College. Please accept our tiny gesture." I feel very guilty, Professor Bacon. Sherlock sighed and looked at Professor Bacon. He then nodded and said, "Okay, since Professor Bacon is so insistent, I shall accept graciously." Lord Sherlock, during the 2 days of construction, I discovered something that made me uneasy. Professor Bacon looked worried as he stared at the distant humans, fairies, and elves and said, "Have you opened up the tunnel that connects to the surface world? The surface world is full of evil and decadent creatures. It gives me chills just thinking about it. Lord Sherlock, you have to be careful." Don't worry. These surface world creatures are different. They aren't the decadent kind. Do you remember that I mentioned expanding our collaboration? These surface world creatures were summoned by me, so we don't have to worry about their death compensation. But considering the costs required to deceive them into coming to the Underworld, I have to charge a little, Sherlock said to Professor Bacon. I see. Since Lord Sherlock has made plans, I won't have to worry. Don't you require some special effects? Many of our graduates are good at aesthetics. It's not necessary. I have received a great deal from Spectre College, and if I impose on you further, I'll feel bad. I'll take care of the rest, Sherlock said earnestly. Okay, if you insist, I won't say much. As for using the surface world creatures as combatants, I will inform you once the school comes to a decision. Don't worry, it'll be all right. I'll have to impose on Professor Bacon. Let's go, Lord Sherlock. Let me show you the progress of the construction. After the inspection, Professor Bacon left with the Spectre College staff. The gamers watched from afar. Due to the restraint imposed by Sherlock, they were unable to get close. The main gate was to be used by the gamers of Eternal Kingdom to enter the Ogre Fortress. As for the crevice made by Lilo, it would be the entrance for the gamers of Victoria City. Once the infrastructure was completed, the remaining task was the software portion. Sherlock returned to Eternal Kingdom and started editing new content. Announcement of version 0.33 update. Chapter 360. Version 0.33 update log. In the Winterfell Garrison Guard main hall, Garrison Guard Captain Cherry was pacing in his office. Recently, there were fewer crimes in Winterfell because there were fewer citizens of Eternal Kingdom present. According to news, those creatures were at the border fighting the ogres. Cherry was befuddled. In his eyes, those creatures with green words above their heads were criminals. But now, they were the first in line to protect Winterfell, and it wasn't the first time they protected it. Cherry was sighing, regretting his misunderstanding of the citizens of Eternal Kingdom when he heard a knock at the door. Please enter, Cherry said. The door opened, and a gnome walked in. Cherry was taken aback at the sight of the gnome. He stood up excitedly and walked forward as he asked, Bond? Why are you here? Didn't you leave Winterfell a few years ago? Bond shook his head. He shut and locked the door before surveying the surroundings warily. He then took out a strange device and activated it. The device emitted beeping sounds. After checking his device, he put it away and sat down with a grave expression. No, I didn't leave. In fact, I joined the Winterfell intelligence unit. Bond said in a low voice, it was top secret, so I didn't tell you. Instead, I told you that I was leaving Winterfell. Apologies, old friend. I see. Sherry nodded and sighed before asking, "Have you retired?" "We don't have the concept of retirement. I'm not here to catch up with you, Sherry," Bond said solemnly. "Today, I need your assistance in a mission. I can't use the resources in the intelligence unit or the name of the dungeon. The only capable candidate who is an outsider and can handle this matter is you." Sherry became nervous since it seemed that Bond was going to give him an important mission. "This is a mission assigned directly by the Merchant Alliance's higher management, one that bypasses Dungeon Lord Nicholas," Bond said. "Visit the location occupied by the ogres and investigate Eternal Kingdom." On the official discussion forum, the gamers discovered a new monster card and a new background story. Monster name: Ogre. Monster introduction: the ogre is one of the ancient races of the underworld with high intelligence, and a small portion of them have natural mana affinity. They will voluntarily fight against most creatures and live together in tribes that are extremely competitive. Their food source is intelligent creatures. As such, they are a widely hated race. If you encounter an ogre alone, there is no chance of escape. Please fight bravely and die as a hero. Level: 10 to 15. Possible loot: magic stones, ogre equipment, and other inventory. Note: most pieces of ogre equipment can be reforged at the blacksmith shop. Besides the ogres, there were other wandering beasts in the sighing wilderness. The bestiary was updated, and everyone was shocked by the rapid updates. Firstly, there was customer service for them to vent their frustration. Was the game going to be officially released now that the updates were so frequent? Next were the details of the updates. Ogres are one of the most ancient underworld races. Unlike the other peace-loving underworld creatures, they are born to kill. 100,000 years ago, the ogres were the most loyal force of the Void Army. After we defeated the Void Army, these ogres started rising up. Now that the ancient gods are getting restless, the ogres have appeared in the world again. Under the leadership of Polio, the ogres have increased in number over time. The attacks of Victoria City and Eternal Kingdom ended in failure. The ogres are almost unstoppable. The world is falling into darkness. The developer's words: "Dearest gamers, greetings. I'm the developer, Sherlock. Dungeon is going to the second game version, Ogre. In this second version, the gamers will compete with the evil ogres for the territory of the Sighing Wilderness. Your outposts may not be safe, as the ogres may launch attacks on them when the odds are favorable. In this version, we have allowed faction war gameplay and created new content, honor points. We will set up a faction logistics officer in each faction. You may use the honor points to purchase various items. You can learn more through personal exploration. Dungeon was released for beta testing half a year ago and was widely supported. I would like to thank everyone. We know that we're lacking in certain areas, and we'll obtain everyone's feedback with humility. Please don't worry. Please take a look at the updated content. I wish everyone a good gaming experience. Version 0.33 Update Log, New Game Material, Dungeon, Ogre. We added a new scene, the Sighing Wilderness. Located at the Winterfell border area, it was named the Sighing Wilderness by the citizens of Eternal Kingdom. It used to be a peaceful area, but after the appearance of the Ogre Fortress, various evil underworld creatures like dire wolves and underground spiders started appearing there. Added a new character, Ogre Leader Polio. The powerful Polio and the ogres have occupied the Ogre Fortress. They were powerful enough to defeat Duchess Lilo and Lord Sherlock. If Polio occupies the entire Sighing Wilderness, the world will be destroyed. Added a new 5-member instance dungeon, the Ogre Fortress. The sturdy fortress used to be a Winterfell stronghold, but now it's an evil nest. Polio occupied the fortress and wants to make it a breeding ground for the ogres. We cannot allow the ogres to do what they want. We have to attack. The conditions for challenging the instance dungeon: 1. Complete the prerequisite mission, Beginning of Ogre Fortress. 2. Eternal Kingdom, Victoria City Reputation Level 8. 3. Close Combat Weapon Level 6. 4. Completed the mission, Lord Sherlock, Duchess Lilo's Affirmation. Submission of 10 magic stones or 100 silver coins. 5. Random mission. I will add when I think of it. Added new exchange points, honor points. After killing gamers from the opposing faction, you will receive honor points, which can be used to purchase items or equipment. Added new equipment exchange system, opposing faction equipment exchange. After killing gamers from the opposing faction, you may obtain their equipment. Do not reforge the equipment. Instead, submit it to your faction logistics officer and obtain honor points based on the quality of the equipment. The gamers who lost their equipment due to faction conflict can redeem their equipment from the faction logistics officer using reputation points. Added a new Eternal Kingdom logistics officer, Black Dragon Eggface. Eggface will be the acting logistics officer. Added new Victoria City logistics officer, Big Boss Hamster. Big Boss of the 3 hamsters will be the acting logistics officer. Added a new bug, equipment damage. During faction conflicts, the equipment of the gamers may be damaged. If your equipment is damaged, you will have to repair it. Equipment can be damaged beyond repair. I will add a wild card. I will add it when I think of it. Chapter 361, Winterfell Agent. Meeting you at the deep end of my life. This world is almost destroyed numerous times. Smiling Nangong. Equipment is fleeting. We want the faction rides. There is a huge handsome black horse in Victoria City. This is interesting. Playing with a bug, you are more powerful than Ubisoft. Yams_Sky. My equipment was damaged yesterday, and you're telling me that it's a bug? Sherlock felt that the gamers were very happy with the new updates. What could the honor points be exchanged for? Sherlock was creating the list. 1 unit of spider leg, 100 honor points. 1 unit of spider meat, 100 honor points. Eternal Kingdom standard equipment, ordinary white equipment, 1000 honor points. Lord Sherlock? While Sherlock was carefully creating the exchange list, Brew spoke beside Sherlock's ear. Are the points not too high? Too high? I think it's reasonable. They are items to be exchanged for. If I lower the points, I fear I may go bankrupt, Sherlock said solemnly. With Lord Sherlock's wealth, it's not easy for you to go bankrupt. If you set the level too high, your body may not be able to take it, Bruce said with concern. If you put spider meat and spider legs onto the list, it won't be good for Lilo and your health. I'm starting to understand, Sherlock nodded. As for equipment, it can be purchased with coins and honor points. Like the Eternal Kingdom standard equipment, it can be purchased for 100 honor points and 3 silver coins. I'm suggesting creating classy equipment as a reward. The name can sound very cool, for example. Brew pondered for a while and said, Great Martial Equipment Set. The name itself sounds cool. I understand, your suggestion is good. Sherlock nodded and started making amendments. In the Dungeon Lord main hall, besides Sherlock, Eggface was also working diligently. Many gamers were queuing up to harass him, so Eggface was feeling indignant and typing furiously on his keyboard. In order to play computer games, no matter how harassed Eggface felt, he wouldn't say or do anything that was out of line. Eggface replied to those gamers patiently. Dungeon. Customer service Eggface. Dearest, we told you that there are no hidden missions. The one who knocked you out is non-existent. Cool breeze buttocks. But I was really knocked unconscious by an NPC. Take a look. I even took a screenshot. That is the creature that knocked me out and searched my body. All of my food was stolen. Are NPCs allowed to rob gamers? Is that a bug? Dungeon. Customer service Eggface. Dearest, are you sure that you were robbed after you were knocked out and that you didn't just eat the food yourself? Cool breeze buttocks. Of course I didn't. Did I not send you the screenshots? Take a look. I was robbed by an NPC. As Eggface was about to reply to Cool Breeze buttocks, Sherlock moved behind him and examined the screenshot. There was a strong orc wearing a black costume. At this time, Cool Breeze buttocks sent another message. Cool Breeze buttocks. I asked around on the discussion forum. That is Winterfell Garrison Guard Captain Cherry. He was the one who rewarded us with money. Eggface gave a standard formal reply, and Sherlock stopped looking. He was pondering when Bruce said, Lord Sherlock, Dungeon Lord Nicholas is still distrustful of you. No, I don't think he's working for Nicholas. Though I reported 10,000 casualties, 2 million magic stones is a small sum to help Nicholas with the ogre crisis. I didn't receive any intelligence on Nicholas checking up on me either, said Sherlock as he shook his head. Wait, Lord Sherlock, do you have Baron Nicholas under surveillance? Brew asked in surprise. Why did you call it surveillance? It's 24-hour protection for him. After all, he's an important collaborative partner. As for the intelligence, it's a byproduct of the protection. Sherlock casually said, this isn't Nicholas's arrangement. Most likely, it's something arranged by the Merchant Alliance to find out information about Eternal Kingdom. I have to ask Captain Cherry. Sherlock walked towards the door, and he said to Eggface, "Take care of things here at home, Eggface." Eggface was no longer sitting in his chair. At this time, he had charged outside the Dungeon Lord main hall and was lifting up a gnome called Coolbreeze buttocks. He strangled the gamer with his claws and pinned him to the wall while he shouted with agitation at the spectating gamers, "Ha! Haven't you seen an NPC beating up a gamer before? Do you see what I'm doing? Ah?" Sherlock put on his hat and left by the side. It was normal for some friendly brawls to occur to improve employee relationships. In the spacious wilderness, Cherry wore his long cloak and gazed down at the moving creatures on the distant plain. He also noticed the fortress that was occupied by the ogres. He was there under the orders of the Merchant Alliance to conduct a secret mission. He had to investigate the details of the battle between Eternal Kingdom and the ogres. It was mainly to investigate Eternal Kingdom, as the Merchant Alliance seemed very interested in Eternal Kingdom's affairs. The Merchant Alliance also suspected that Eternal Kingdom and Dungeon Lord Nicholas had an insidious agreement. Cherry was also interested to know. He applied for a month's worth of vacation so that he could come here to investigate. It was the second day since he arrived in the wilderness. Patrols were conducted 24 hours per day in the wilderness, and he couldn't detect any patterns. Occasionally, the patrols would conduct suicidal attacks on the large wild creatures. Were there too many wild creatures roaming the wilderness? On his first day, Cherry discovered an astonishing fact: there were humans. Chapter 362. Meeting. He discovered the humans on his first day. The evil and decadent creatures were forming groups to hunt the underworld beasts. It was the first time he felt pity for the underworld beasts. The surface world's decadent creatures were also fighting viciously against Eternal Kingdom's warriors. Cherry was unable to understand why there were only small skirmishes instead of full-scale war. Of course, they killed each other in the skirmishes. Why did Eternal Kingdom not exterminate the outpost created by the surface world? If Eternal Kingdom was worried that they might not defeat them, why did Eternal Kingdom not inform Winterfell? This territory belonged to the Merchant Alliance, so Winterfell would definitely intervene if the Merchant Alliance came to know of the human invasion. Did Eternal Kingdom keep the human output for some other special reason? Cherry wasn't sure. He had to obtain more detailed intelligence to form a proper conclusion. Cherry felt that it was difficult to obtain intelligence in the bare wilderness that was infested with wild beasts. He was fortunate to encounter a lone gnome. He knocked the gnome out, and while he didn't obtain any useful information, he stole all of the gnome's food. What about the unconscious gnome? Cherry placed him at a hidden and safe spot and made sure that the gnome wouldn't recognize him. Cherry had encountered hundreds of citizens of Eternal Kingdom. From the size of the outpost, he estimated that there were thousands of warriors, and the number wasn't coincidental. After meeting them, Samael invaded Winterfell. In order to protect Winterfell, Eternal Kingdom incurred 100,000 casualties. How did Eternal Kingdom incur tens of thousands of casualties when it was newly constructed 6 months ago? Where did Eternal Kingdom obtain that many creatures? Lord Sherlock was deep and unfathomable. Cherry's surveillance was going to be a long ordeal. Cherry didn't know that Lord Sherlock, whom he felt strongly about, had used invisibility to follow him. In fact, Sherlock had followed him for quite a bit of time. Lord Sherlock, this Winterfell garrison guard captain doesn't look like he's touring. I suggest capturing, torturing, and interrogating him. Hand him over to the gamers. They have a million ways to make him spill the beans. Believe me, Brew suggested earnestly. Though Brew's suggestion was good in the most direct way, Sherlock didn't intend to use his method. Cherry is an experienced garrison guard captain. According to my investigation, he was almost recruited by the Winterfell intelligence unit. Due to personal reasons, he became a garrison guard. Even if we torture him, we'll not get anything. Besides, Sherlock paused for a while and said, if I was senior management in the Merchant Alliance and observed a developing dungeon saving Winterfell twice with tens of thousands of casualties, and if the dungeon was located in the most desolate part of the northern underworld, I would definitely investigate this cheap and dilapidated dungeon that claimed millions of magic stones and tons of raw materials. Lord Sherlock, I have to correct the term cheap and dilapidated dungeon. I was merely waiting for the destined Lord Sherlock, Brew said poetically. Whatever it is, I have no enmity towards the Merchant Alliance, so attacking Cherry isn't the best choice. Besides, he will be able to take back the information that I wish to provide. After all, we've had too high a profile during this period of time. Sherlock continued following Cherry and said, find a few good actors from both factions. They have to be obedient, so you may give them greater rewards. I understand, Lord Sherlock. Not Wearing Pants was a little happy, as he and his comrades had received a special mission. Mission title: Faction Conflict. Mission description: the conflict between Victoria City and Eternal Kingdom has reached a boiling point, but there is a common goal of dealing with the ogres. Brainiac has been in contact with the hamsters, and you have been chosen to accompany Brainiac in his quest to secure the future of both factions. Mission objective: follow Brainiac, and do not stray from the group. The mission duration may last for an hour, so please make the proper arrangements. Mission reward: you will obtain the favor of Lord Sherlock, and there may be more hidden missions in the future. If you fail, your name will be struck off the Dungeon Lord's list. This special mission was assigned to gamers from both Victoria City and Eternal Kingdom. Each faction would bring 5 gamers, a fact that Not Wearing Pants had confirmed on the discussion forum. The other gamers came to know of Not Wearing Pants' mission, and they hoped to join them in this mission, but they were rejected by Brainiac. The rejection method was direct and violent, and it wouldn't be elaborated. The emotionless Brainiac led the way. In accordance with Lord Sherlock's instructions, he led the gamers of Eternal Kingdom and followed Sherlock's scent. The journey wasn't long. They had walked for less than an hour when Brainiac saw the destination. A few humans and elves walked towards them upon their arrival. Brainiac took out a piece of paper and examined it several times. Then, he turned his head and said to the gamers behind him, "We are meeting the citizens of Victoria City. Please keep quiet. If communication breaks down, there may be a conflict. Don't be merciful, and go for the kill, but do not harm the hamster." Peasant was stunned. There was too much information in Brainiac's speech, and they couldn't absorb the content. Before they recovered from their shock, a fat hamster came over. The factions met behind a huge rock. Cherry was sleeping in his dull gray sleeping bag. He intentionally stacked many rocks to camouflage his location, making it hard to detect the sleeping bag from afar. Brainiac and the hamster brought 5 gamers each for a negotiation. Their voices made Cherry wake up in fright. Cherry looked around and located the source of the voices. Once he crept carefully forward. He felt that he was pretty lucky to discover such a situation during his sleep. A lich from Eternal Kingdom was meeting a human from Victoria City in such a desolate wilderness. Cherry had intentionally chosen a place to rest that was far away from both outposts. Obviously, there was a great conspiracy. Cherry was very quiet as he crawled behind the rocky slope and listened intently to the group. They didn't disappoint him. Big Boss Hamster spoke first in his helium voice, saying, "You're here, Brainiac, according to our agreement." Big Boss looked at his A4 paper before he said, "We can't afford to fight with each other with the ogre threat increasing every day. We have to cooperate." Chapter 363. Cherry's Speculation. What? Eternal Kingdom was conspiring with the human faction? Did Eternal Kingdom release these creatures from the human faction? Had Eternal Kingdom defected? It was now apparent to Cherry why the two factions engaged in small skirmishes instead of large-scale wars. There were various groups in each faction who wouldn't yield, so they engaged in their own personal fights. It was only Cherry's initial speculation. He could only be conclusive after a deeper investigation. Now was the opportunity for the investigation. After the hamster finished reading from the A4 paper, Brainiac pondered for a while before saying, "That's right. I feel that we should cooperate. Lord Sherlock said that Victoria City isn't trustworthy, but I see the future threat of the ogres, and we can't defeat them alone." The hamster said, "That's right. Let's discuss the conditions. After defeating the ogres, the Sighing Wilderness will become the territory of Victoria City." Sighing Wilderness? Where was that? Cherry was befuddled. He was sure that he hadn't heard of the Sighing Wilderness before. Was it a territory of Eternal Kingdom? That was possible. No, this Sighing Wilderness belongs to Winterfell and the Underworld Merchant Alliance. Though it's a different faction, Lord Sherlock has always viewed Winterfell as a brother and the Merchant Alliance as one of us. Even if we have to sacrifice 1 million of our citizens to help Winterfell, we'll still do it. Brainiac used his monotonous voice and shouted. That means our negotiation has broken down? Then you shall die. The hamster shouted, and the two parties started fighting viciously. Cherry was shocked by the cruelty and bloodiness of the battle. The battle ended. Arthur sacrificed peasant and burning chest hair to annihilate the gamers of Victoria City. In the 5v5 battle, Arthur's team achieved an overwhelming victory. Victoria City didn't choose their strongest warriors. At least, they didn't see Dragonborn. This is war. Initially, we wanted to avoid conflict, but if you are unrepentant, we'll declare war. Before we deal with the ogres and occupy the sighing wilderness, we will kill all of you. We shall see. The hamster shouted his dialogue from the A4 paper. Afterward, he put the dropped equipment into his pushcart before running to the distant outpost. Brainiac muttered to himself, it seems like war is inevitable. Warriors, we have to prepare early. We can't let Victoria City succeed in its evil plan and defeat the ogres. We have to shoulder these heavy responsibilities. Brainiac left with the gamers while Cherry gaped in astonishment. The hidden Sherlock nodded with satisfaction, and Brew happily said, Lord Sherlock, I understand your intention. When Cherry reports back to the Merchant Alliance, he will say that Eternal Kingdom is on the side of the Merchant Alliance. Using the threat of Victoria City proves our resolve in protecting Winterfell and defeating the ogres. We will gain greater trust from the Merchant Alliance and obtain more resources. At an appropriate time, Victoria City and Eternal Kingdom will attack Winterfell, which will become our stronghold. The first part is my plan, said Sherlock. Victoria City will be discovered sooner or later. Instead of hiding it, it's better to mislead Cherry and the Merchant Alliance, who will support my decision to continue fighting the ogres in Victoria City. If they send an army to deal with Victoria City, we'll withdraw the gamers. I see. I would like to see Lord Sherlock occupy Winterfell, but it's more appropriate to consolidate our power. I understand Lord Sherlock's plan. Sherlock gazed at Cherry, who was packing up and leaving. He then walked in the direction of the Eternal Kingdom outpost as he said, we can leave now. We'll leave it to Cherry to report to the Merchant Alliance. Cherry didn't disappoint Sherlock. After witnessing the conflict between the Underworld and the surface world, Cherry returned to Winterfell. What? Continue to do surveillance because the intelligence gathered was too little? With the continuous 24-hour patrols from Eternal Kingdom and Victoria City, Cherry felt that it was impossible for him to do surveillance at close proximity. If he walked on the Great Wilderness, he would be discovered immediately. Cherry was impressed by the security of the Eternal Kingdom faction, as there were at least a few thousand warriors patrolling the area. Moreover, he had obtained the required intelligence. With what he gathered, he had arrived at a conclusion. After arriving at a safe area, Cherry wrote an intelligence report before sending the burnt letter to Bond. After my intensive investigation, I discovered a shocking secret. In this wilderness, there were ogres and forces of Eternal Kingdom and Victoria City. I don't know how Victoria City infiltrated the Underworld, but Eternal Kingdom is currently defending the Sighing Wilderness from them. I don't know the location of the Sighing Wilderness, nor have I discovered other details, but I'm sure that the ogres are holding the key to the Sighing Wilderness. They mentioned that they have to defeat the ogres before occupying the Sighing Wilderness. Accordingly, the Sighing Wilderness is part of the territory of the Merchant Alliance. I don't recall the Merchant Alliance having a place called the Sighing Wilderness, so I can't explain this point. I conclude that there is a precious treasure in the Sighing Wilderness. Chapter 364. Responsibility of a Superior Devil. In the dark cage, a deformed man with multiple injuries lay on the ground motionless. If not for his breathing, anyone would have thought that he was dead. Footsteps were heard outside, and soon, a fat human followed behind a few guards as they came over from a dark tunnel. Nobody spoke. The fat human paced in front of the cage a few times and then asked the guard, "How long has the situation been like this?" "Since he arrived. Unless he wants to move, we have no way to make him move. When he's sleeping, nobody can wake him. If he's not willing, nobody can force him. I've never seen such a strong-willed person," the guard explained in fear. The fat human nodded and remained silent. After a moment, a guard came over and whispered, "Master, the best sword trainer in the city is here." Let him in," the fat human ordered. Upon his order, a tall, slim, and bearded man entered. He was the best sword trainer in the city. "Great Lord." The sword trainer bowed to the fat human who nodded and said, "I need you to train this man. He has a powerful will and will become a powerful fighter. I understand, great lord, the sword trainer said respectfully. Ooh, great lord, Hoodlum is awake. As the fat human was about to leave, the guard shouted. The fat human looked excitedly at the wounded Hoodlum, whose face was filled with determination. What mission is it today? Is it a vicious beating? No lad, today's mission is to defeat me with all you've got, the bearded sword trainer said. Bond received the shocking letter from Cherry and conveyed the news to the Merchant Alliance. Before long, Nicholas received a letter from the Merchant Alliance. I'm supposed to investigate the treasure at the Sighing Wilderness? After becoming the Winterfell Dungeon Lord, Nicholas knew more confidential information and had more problems, such as this sudden suggestion letter. Though Nicholas was supposed to investigate the treasure at the Sighing Wilderness, from the given intelligence, Lord Sherlock was also interested in the treasure. Was that the reason Sherlock took up this mission voluntarily? Nicholas didn't want to become an enemy of Sherlock, who was a superior devil with a formidable family background. Perhaps his dad was even one of the Devil Kings. The fight with Samael could be a family dispute with his uncle. Moreover, Nicholas hadn't heard of the Sighing Wilderness before. Most likely, the letter was sent to him to create trouble. If he didn't investigate the Sighing Wilderness, the Merchant Alliance would accuse him of siding with Eternal Kingdom instead of the Merchant Alliance. But if he conducted the investigation, he could spoil his cordial relationship with Lord Sherlock. What should he do? While Nicholas was feeling distressed, the always helpful Lord Sherlock arrived in his office. Lord Nicholas, Lord Sherlock is waiting for you outside. Nicholas's orc assistant knocked on the door and informed him. What, Lord Sherlock is here? Nicholas quickly put away the letter and walked towards the door. He asked, where is Lord Sherlock? He opened the door and saw the orc assistant accompanying Sherlock outside the door. Lord Sherlock, it has been a few days, and Dungeon Lord Nicholas looks as good as before. Sherlock looked at Baron Nicholas's pale face and asked, can I come in? Of course. Brew a cup of tea for Lord Sherlock. Sherlock walked into Nicholas's office, and both of them sat down. Then, Sherlock said directly, I'm here because I have a matter to inform Dungeon Lord Nicholas about. The mission to clear the Ogre Fortress is basically completed. Though there's a small group of defiant ogres occupying the depths of the fortress, they don't pose a serious threat, but... Lord Sherlock, don't you worry. Eternal Kingdom has paid a high price to clear the Ogre Fortress. The citizens of Winterfell and I will always remember that. Of course, I've prepared the death compensation. Lord Sherlock, don't worry about the money, Nicholas said quickly. I'm relieved to hear that, but I'm not referring to this matter. Sherlock looked concerned as he said, while Eternal Kingdom and the ogres were fighting to the death, a group of humans, fairies, and elves secretly built an outpost close to the Ogre Fortress. I have the intention to exterminate the decadent human faction, but their leader is a Duchess Lilo, and she is very powerful. Our first wave of attack was neutralized by the humans of Victoria City. Don't you worry, though, to protect Winterfell, we will fight these humans to the death, and we won't charge any death compensation. Nicholas was astonished and said, You won't charge death compensation? But Lord Sherlock, no buts. I know your good intentions, Dungeon Lord, but this is no longer about Winterfell. This concerns the whole of the Underworld. As a reliable, ambitious, and young superior devil and dungeon lord, I have a responsibility to help the Underworld fight against the human faction, Sherlock said righteously and interrupted Nicholas, who was about to speak. Don't say a word, Dungeon Lord Nicholas. Just let me handle this. Of course, I'll just be upfront. Is there a problem if Eternal Kingdom takes the loot from the humans, fairies, and elves? Of course there's no problem. I'm moved by your gesture to sacrifice for the Underworld. I feel guilty. If I wasn't recently appointed as the Dungeon Lord and things weren't so unstable, I'd fight with Lord Sherlock to chase the surface world races out of the Underworld. Nicholas was welling up with tears. He took out a letter and swallowed hard, saying, The Merchant Alliance already knows about your recent moves, and they conducted an investigation. Don't you worry, Lord Sherlock, this isn't the decision of the majority of the Merchant Alliance. There are just some high-level officials who are jealous of me and want to scheme against me. Has Lord Sherlock seen any suspicious characters recently? Sherlock took the letter from Nicholas. He examined it a bit and stroked his chin as he said helplessly, Tisk, it seems quite logical at first glance. What are you talking about, Lord Sherlock? I didn't expect the officials of the Merchant Alliance to be against you. They are certainly evil. Don't you worry, Dungeon Lord Nicholas, our relationship won't be affected, and the alliance between Eternal Kingdom and Winterfell won't erode. Sherlock smiled and reassured Nicholas. Of course, Nicholas said confidently. I need to explain something. The Sighing Wilderness doesn't have any treasure. We named the plains near the Ogre Fortress as the Sighing Wilderness for convenience. The decadent faction of the surface world intends to occupy the Sighing Wilderness as their base because of the availability of rich resources and the defenses afforded by the fortress. That's what I'm guessing. Don't worry, they don't have large numbers, so I'm able to deal with them. Nicholas was relieved. He said, Lord Sherlock, I'm relieved to hear that. I'll report this matter to resolve the misunderstanding. Don't you require the assistance of Winterfell? It's not necessary. As Winterfell has suffered several setbacks and things are unstable, it's better for Winterfell to settle down first. Nobody is a good choice to be the Winterfell Dungeon Lord except for Dungeon Lord Nicholas. If you are implicated, it won't be good news for Eternal Kingdom. I understand. Lord Sherlock, you have to be extra careful. If you need additional troops, just inform me. Though you have declined my death compensation, I have decided to sponsor Lord Sherlock with some equipment. Please don't decline. Nicholas looked insistent, and Sherlock didn't wish to refuse his good intentions, so he nodded awkwardly. I can't refuse you anymore. I shall accept your kindness. Please provide more orc standard equipment, as I'm recruiting orcs. Chapter 365. Difficulty of Conquering Ogre Fortress. The Eternal Kingdom Outpost at the Sighing Wilderness. This is difficult. Burning Chest Hair looked at the conditions for challenging the Ogre Fortress Instance Dungeon and immediately shouted, one has to have reputation level 8 and weapon level 6. I think there are at most 50 gamers in Eternal Kingdom who qualify. And there will be none in Victoria City. That's great. We'll increase the distance so that we can bully gamers of Victoria City even more. Peasant said happily. We can still bully them now, but in the future, it won't be possible. Study the forum, and you'll understand. There is no magic stone system in Victoria City, and the equipment pricing is cheaper and quality higher. It costs us an arm and a leg to obtain blue superior equipment, but the prices in Victoria City are half of ours, and the reputation level requirements are one level down. Some of their gamers have even already obtained legendary equipment that's on par with Arthur's. Sylvanas immediately said, so what? Their combat techniques are far inferior. Not to mention, we have Arthur on our side. They have Dragonborn on their side. Sylvanas waved her fists at Burning Chest Hair and hissed, saying, what did you say? Can Dragonborn be compared to Arthur? Stop joking. Dragonborn's equipment is inferior to Arthur's, but if he has quality equipment. Sylvanas strangled Peasant's throat like a python. I'm dying. Release your hands. The gamers quickly came to Peasant's aid. As for Arthur, he remained emotionless and silent. In the Eternal Kingdom seedbed, the little fairy was in her treehouse, teaching Raintia how to make magic potions. Look carefully. I'll add some yellow medicine and stir evenly before pouring it out. Raintia imitated the little fairy's action. Some of the raw materials were provided by Sherlock, while the majority were cultivated by Raintia herself. Palm. Raintia noticed black smoke coming from the magic potion vial and was shocked. The little fairy nodded and looked pleased. Then, she became disdainful and hugged her arms as she said, Humph. You've only just started learning how to make magic potions, but you are way better than those dumb houndhead men and goblins. Ah, thank you, teacher. Raintia was extremely happy. Don't be too happy. The side effects of the magic potion are significant. Though it can heal most non-fatal wounds, I wouldn't take it unless I was left with no choice. After all, the magic potion will reduce one's lifespan. The little fairy warned about the side effects, but to the gamers, the side effects were negligible. The reduction of lifespan had no bearing on the gamers since they couldn't live very long. Raintia obtained the first vial of magic potion. She could have become a life connoisseur gamer and been content. Now, she could produce magic potions, and she was excited. As it was too tedious and difficult to produce magic potions, only Raintia was able to do so. She became the first gamer to produce a healing potion. The system gave this healing potion a description. Name. Minor healing potion. Description. Will heal non-fatal wounds in a short time. Effects. Recovers 10% of health within a minute. Not to be used within 10 minutes of a previous application. Tips. Consecutive uses of 50 times or more can lead to death. Selling price. 100 reputation points, 100 bronze coins. Even Victoria City had started to produce minor healing potions. Within a few days, the price of minor healing potions would skyrocket. Sherlock's target wasn't the minor healing potion, as it wasn't profitable due to the damaging side effects. His targets were advanced potions, which were worth even more. With the advent of the minor healing potion, large-scale production was added to the factory schedule. In a room with a burning torch, a tall ogre with glimmering yellow eyes swung his huge mace at the surrounding gnomes who were wielding large shields. A black armored gnome charged forward while wielding a shimmering black longsword that indicated quality equipment. The gnome was agile. He rolled and evaded the ogre's fist, then stabbed deeply into the ogre's stomach. The sword only went halfway in before it was stopped by the ogre's muscles. The ogre grabbed the gnome and slammed him to the ground with a large palm. "How dare you treat Arthur like that? Death to you!" An ugly female gnome readied her bow and fired 3 consecutive arrows, 2 of which hit the ogre at non-critical spots. If an arrow didn't hit a critical spot, the damage was limited. As for the third arrow, it hit Not Wearing Pants' kidney. He broke the arrow and said in an aggrieved tone, "The ogre is the one beating up Arthur, bro, so why did you shoot at me? He's a boss. Why are you angry with a boss? Are you being silly? Why are you nagging at me? Inflict damage on the ogre." Sylvanas shouted loudly. While the ogre was distracted by the 2 of them, an agile gnome rolled on the ground behind him and attacked with his daggers. Horizontal slash, berserker strike, horizontal slash, berserker strike, chain attacks. A mace smashed down violently, and burning chest hair became quiet. After the deaths of Arthur and burning chest hair, the combat power of the team was reduced to half. Though the ogre was seriously wounded, it would still take some time before it collapsed to the ground. To defeat the ogre, the current amount of damage wasn't sufficient. Before long, the 5-member team was annihilated, and they appeared at the revival point of the Sighing Wilderness. "This is too difficult. We challenged the instance dungeon 3 times, but we failed." Peasant knelt on the ground in despair. All his equipment was lost in the instance dungeon, and he could only spend reputation points and game currency to purchase new equipment after a few hours. They felt cheated after losing their equipment and having to pay to redeem it. However, they had gotten used to it. How did the equipment in the instance dungeon appear in Eternal Kingdom? According to gamers on the forum, they received missions to retrieve the equipment in the instance dungeon. Then, they sent it back to Eternal Kingdom. The gamers had to do everything themselves, including retrieving equipment, redeeming it, and building houses for NPCs. "Why don't we buy some healing potions before challenging the ogres?" Burning Chest Hair suggested. "The price is too high. Let's wait for a few days for the factory update. After that, the price will be more affordable," Not Wearing Pants said. What factory? Arthur was the only one whose equipment was intact. All of his equipment was of legendary quality and was soulbound. After his death, the equipment would be transported to his designated location, so he didn't have to worry about losing his equipment. Of course, the equipment damage bug would still occur. Due to the legendary quality, it was almost impossible for it to be damaged beyond repair. However, the equipment would still be damaged occasionally, and the repair fees were high. A new mission came out today, one to do construction at the side of the marshes of the Marsh Inkspewers. A lot of people received the daily mission to construct the factory. "Don't you do daily missions?" Not Wearing Pants asked. "Wait a moment, that mission is about constructing a factory? What's up with that? Is it like the Winterfell factory that makes us work daily?" Peasant was taken aback. He then shouted, "Wah! This game is inhumane. We're constructing factories for them to exploit us. I'll complain once customer service is online." "Don't talk about customer service. I've been queued up for 3 days, and it's still not my turn yet. I want to chat with the Black Dragon Lady too." Burning Chest Hair was showing disdain. They started chatting enthusiastically about the Black Dragon Lady. Chapter 366, Hidden Mastermind. Sherlock's schedule was fully booked. His main schedule was inspection. Though the gamers were diligent in their work, Sherlock had to inspect the dungeon to see if there were needed improvements. He also had to check whether the gamers flouted construction rules and created trouble. Besides the dungeon, He also inspected the Winterfell Eternal Kingdom Adventurers Guild, which was a diplomatic gateway to Winterfell. The Winterfell residents who sought the help of the Adventurers Guild were full of praises for Eternal Kingdom. "Ah, that gnome is really good. My toilet bowl was clogged, and he helped to clear it. I'm very touched," an elderly sludge monster granny complimented. But they weren't the most important things. The most important was the factory that was under construction. Eternal Kingdom's factory location was outside the Marsh Inkspewer town. After clearing a large piece of land, the building materials were ample based on the resources of both the surface world and Underworld, whereas specific rare materials could be obtained from Winterfell. As for the design, it could be obtained from the Forum. Sherlock was very familiar with this. "Lord Sherlock, this is a fully automated factory with the best technology and efficiency. Mana consumption is higher, but it requires fewer workers to operate and can mass produce various magic potions. Of course, the operators have to know potion making. With the mana facilities, the requirements have been kept at the lowest level." Eternal Kingdom's mana engineer Yoda was introducing the factory. He was the principal worker and the facilities procurement officer, project supervisor, financial controller, employee insurance manager, materials manager, warehouse manager, and foreman. Very good. Magic stone investment isn't a big problem. What's most important is having high efficiency and attaining the qualifications of an advanced mana facility. Let's try to start production of the minor healing potion within a month, as our dungeon has a large need for this. I will send over more workers with good potion knowledge. After that, we'll set up a second production line. Sherlock nodded, pleased to see thousands of gamers working hard at the construction site. With the mission system, the gamer's productivity was controlled by Sherlock. Gamers who didn't complete missions were a minority. After all, not every gamer was as rich as Arthur. "I understand, Lord Sherlock, but the minor healing potion." Yoda spoke with hesitation. Sherlock took out a vial filled with a black-colored potion and said, "This is the one." "Lord Sherlock, don't worry, I'll complete your assigned mission. However, there's one more issue. Hemp Rope Technology and his people are manufacturing a Gundam Mana robot. I feel it's worth investing in. From the prototype, it looks very promising," Yoda suggested solemnly. Sherlock pondered for a while before nodding. Since you said so, I will provide an investment fund for this research. As for the amount, we'll discuss it later. Are there any pertinent issues?" "No, Lord Sherlock." Yoda bowed respectfully, and Sherlock reciprocated before leaving the worksite. "Lord Sherlock, don't we need to prepare for the Merchant Alliance's matter? Why did Alexandria release Polio from prison? I suspect Alexandria is plotting against you," Bruce said with concern as Sherlock was returning to Eternal Kingdom. "Don't bother with the Merchant Alliance, as they're just a bunch of businessmen. Since Winterfell is ruled by Nicholas, even if there's opposition in the Merchant Alliance, they can't intervene. Isn't it a good thing for Alexandria to release Polio? Because of Polio, the gamers have another entertainment outlet. I'm more concerned about another matter." Sherlock was in a daze as he said, "That intelligence agent, Bond." "Bond? Ah, he's the one who accompanied the gamers to obtain intelligence about the ogres and later fled." "He's lousy," Bruce said with disdain. "His name says that he's awesome." "He's not normal," Sherlock said. "It's all right though, I've arranged for an investigation." A tall figure with a masked face who was wearing a large windbreaker stood in a dark alley. Bustling streets of Winterfell were outside the alley. The figure walked unsteadily and looked as though he would collapse at any time. He braced himself not to fall. As the three hamsters walked into the depths of the alley, voices filled with helium were heard coming from the clothing. "It was here just now. Why did it disappear? The scent is still around. It shouldn't be far off. I smell delicious food." The tall figure suddenly collapsed, and three hamsters squirmed out from the clothing. The rightmost hamster used his paws to tidy his fur before sniffing around. "That's right, the scent is still thick. Big boss, this gnome, Bond, is strange, just like Lord Sherlock said." Why? He disappeared all of a sudden. Only a problematic person would be like that. "Can we go for our meal?" Big Boss and Second Boss chatted excitedly and ignored Fat Otaku's request. Fat Otaku caressed his stomach before searching around. He came to a wall, and his eyes lit up with the temptation of food. He placed his paws on the wall and sensed a fragrance coming from the other side. It was then he felt the wall vanish. He went through the wall and entered a narrow tunnel that was illuminated by magic lamps on the sides. Fat Otaku looked around. He was fully focused on the fragrance of food, which suppressed his fear. His mind went blank as he advanced along the tunnel. The tunnel appeared to have no end. Perhaps it was Fat Otaku's desire for food that distorted his perception of time. Soon, he arrived in front of a room, where he heard voices. No response? Nicholas is indeed allied with Eternal Kingdom, meaning we're unable to instigate Winterfell to fight against Eternal Kingdom. Though we can't do that, there are elements in the Merchant Alliance who are unhappy with Eternal Kingdom. After all, Sherlock recommended Nicholas to be the Dungeon Lord, which hurt the interests of many parties. So what? Nobody will antagonize the successful Eternal Kingdom just because of Winterfell. Though we don't know the background of Sherlock, he was able to defeat the Hades Devil King Samael, and the other 6 Devil Kings compensated him accordingly. Do you really think that the Devil Kings of Hades have become soft after a long period of peace? What should we do? If the Merchant Alliance can't weaken the power of Eternal Kingdom, how can we rob Sherlock of Michelangelo's power? Don't worry, even without the Merchant Alliance, I've made arrangements. Someone else will help us weaken Eternal Kingdom. That silly dude is easily instigated. I see, you were saying. There were 2 creatures talking in the room, but Fat Otaku only managed to eavesdrop on that bit of the conversation. Since he was led to the door by the fragrance of food, he pushed it open listlessly when he arrived. Bond was standing in the room with a dark figure who flashed out of the room immediately. It was as though the dark figure had no physical body. He vanished. Who's that? Bond was surprised, and he unsheathed the dagger from his waist. Impossible. Why was that foolish-looking hamster able to find his secret base? He had made proper precautions. The wall entrance had the protection of many mana runes, so nobody could enter with ease. What was with this hamster? Fat Otaku ignored Bond. He looked in the direction of the dark figure with disappointment, screaming, "Ah! There goes my delicious food." Bond didn't care, charging at Fat Otaku with his dagger. 2 figures pounced on Fat Otaku, and they fell to the ground. They were Big Boss and Second Boss. Silly brother, you almost died. Not bad, Fat Otaku, you helped us find the entrance. Big Boss and Second Boss hollered while Fat Otaku was still screaming, "Ah!" Chapter 367. A Date Invitation. A fully armed group of orcs was equipped with black standard armor, and the first few orcs were bearing large shields. On their backs were the same words, Winterfell Garrison Guard. The orcs had good training and quality equipment. They used their shields to clear the way and carried bows in their other hands, longswords at their waists. They moved stealthily, though the scales on their armor emitted slight noises. They arrived in front of a building, and the leader signaled to the rest with his eyes to say, "The target inside is a highly dangerous creature with many years of intelligence experience. His ways are brutal and without mercy. Everyone has to be extra careful. Don't let him escape." The other orcs replied with their eye signals as well. "I understand, Captain." "Don't worry, Captain. We had the best training." "Captain, your wife eloped." The leader's eyes became sharp. He pointed to the door and made a hand gesture that meant for them to prepare. An orc then walked to the door and knocked, saying with a kind voice, "Greetings. I'm here to check the mana meter." "Is anyone home?" Nobody replied. Even after calling out a few times, there was no reply. The leader showed 2 fingers and nodded. The same orc knocked on the door and said, "Greetings. The smelly worms and irrigated clay that you ordered are here. Please open the door." But there was no reply. The leader signaled with his eyes that said, "Prepare to burst in." The orc nodded and took out a metal strip, picking the lock. Before long, the door was opened. They dashed in without any delay, and some shouted, while others fired their arrows with closed eyes. After a few minutes of calm, they saw the serenity in the room. A gnome lay on the ground with his eyes wide open. It was Bond, the intelligence agent. There was an arrow lodged in his skull, and he had a terrified look on his face. "I killed the agent?" one of the garrison guards asked nervously. "No, he wasn't killed by you." The leader walked over and checked Bond's breathing. He discovered the strangle marks on his throat, a length of rope to the side, and a piece of paper in his hands. The words on the paper were, "Will, a gnome agent's regret." Palm. Nicholas pounded heavily on the table with his fist and shouted, "What? Bond killed himself?" The garrison guard was at the door when he killed himself? Yes, Dungeon Lord. This is the full report. A sludge monster handed him a report. Nicholas examined it and asked, "Where is Lord Sherlock?" 20 minutes later. It looks like he committed suicide to escape punishment. Sherlock sat inside Nicholas's office and commented as he looked at the report. It seems like it. Nicholas said gravely, "I reported this to the higher-ups." Sherlock nodded. The three hamsters discovered the secret meeting between Bond and the mysterious figure, learning that the investigation on Eternal Kingdom was a ploy to sour the relationship between the Merchant Alliance and Eternal Kingdom. The final goal was Michelangelo's relic, which was in Sherlock's hand. There was a dark, insidious force plotting against Sherlock. How did Sherlock handle it? He reported it to the garrison guard. To be more precise, he informed Winterfell. After all, the incident involved Bond, who was a Winterfell intelligence agent, so it was better for Winterfell to deal with it. However, he hadn't expected it to have such an outcome. Sherlock ended the meeting with Nicholas amidst an atmosphere of worry. Nicholas was very worried because he didn't know of the insidious plot that could affect his precarious dungeon lord position. Everything was a mystery. When Sherlock stepped out of the Winterfell dungeon lord main hall, Bruce said, "Lord Sherlock, this isn't a simple incident. From Fat Otaku's testimonial and memory, the enemy schemed against us. With Bond being silenced, things look very bad for us. I think I have an inkling of the scheme." Sherlock walked to a newspaper vendor and stopped, looking at a newspaper placed outside. The newspaper obscured all of the advertisements and discounts and showed the unimportant news. This was to prevent creatures like Sherlock from browsing. The important point was the content that had the words, "The second successor to Eternal Fire will be visiting Winterfell." The second successor to Eternal Fire? Wasn't Andrew the third successor? Why would the second successor visit Winterfell? Wasn't Andrew sent to prison recently? Brew raised his doubts, but Sherlock only shrugged to indicate his ignorance. It was obvious that the visit by the second successor wasn't that simple. At Victoria City, things are like that. It's too terrifying. Big Boss stood before Lilo and explained the occurrence in detail. Second Boss said in fear, "That's right, they used the fragrance of food to tempt Fat Otaku. If we weren't fast enough, we would have been killed by that gnome." "Oh, I can still eat." Fat Otaku, who was lying on the ground beside the other two hamsters, said incoherently, looking blissful. "What happened to him?" Lilo, who was sitting in her chair, frowned as she gazed at Fat Otaku. Lord Sherlock peeped into his memory not long ago. According to his request, Sherlock placed some memories inside. Fat Otaku hasn't recovered. Should be some blissful memories. Big Boss and Second Boss explained. What did Sherlock say? Did he know the mastermind? "If there is any mishap before the conquest of the Heavenly Kingdom, we will get back our loan with interest." Did you emphasize this point to Sherlock? Lilo wasn't concerned about Fat Otaku's condition. "Yes, we conveyed your words. Sherlock would like to reassure you that he never deceived you," Big Boss replied. "Ah, I understand." Lilo waved her hand and gestured for them to leave. "Let those coolies work and train harder. If they can't deal with the ogres, they can't fight with the Heavenly Kingdom." "Yes," Big Boss and Second Boss replied. They dragged Fat Otaku, who was still lying on the ground, out. Lilo took out a crystal ball after the three hamsters had left. The image of Sherlock appeared in the crystal ball. He was playing computer games in the Dungeon Lord main hall, seemingly alone in the room. The small black dragon with an unknown gender wasn't around, but his nest was still at the corner of the room. The door of the Dungeon Lord main hall was opened, and a conservatively dressed succubus came in. It was Evelyn. There was an expression of disgust on Lilo's face. Lilo's hand grasped the crystal ball, and voices could be heard coming from it. Lord Sherlock?" Evelyn stood behind Sherlock's computer and tried to get his attention. Sherlock removed his headphones and looked at Evelyn in a daze. "What's the matter?" Lord Sherlock, the dungeon doesn't look very busy." Sherlock was taken aback. He had been doing inspections, building factories, going to meetings in Winterfell, browsing the forum, and updating content. All of that caused his time for computer game research to go down by a few hours. Wasn't he busy? Evelyn felt that she wasn't precise enough and quickly said, "No, I'm not very busy. But seeing Lord Sherlock very busy, I'm unable to help you. So I was thinking of..." Evelyn took out 2 tickets and looked nervously at Sherlock. Recently, there has been a nice drama performance in Winterfell. I would like to invite Lord Sherlock to watch it together. You feel sorry seeing me so busy, so you're inviting me to a drama performance? Is that it? Sherlock asked. What? Is this succubus hindering Lord Sherlock's great plan? I can't forgive her. Dismiss her immediately. She's here to create trouble. Brue said to Sherlock, but he ignored Brue. Yes, yes. Can I? Evelyn looked pitiful. In fact, I'm very busy, so. Sherlock looked at the tickets in Evelyn's hand. He was bewildered for 2 seconds before he smiled and said, so, though I'm busy, I can't disappoint Miss Evelyn. It'll be my honor to accompany Miss Evelyn to the show. Chapter 368. Preparation for a date. Tisk, tisk. Lord Sherlock, your personal love life is in a mess. You accepted Evelyn's date invitation. If Evelyn thinks you're interested in her, then it'll be interesting. Brue said emotionally, but Sherlock didn't share Brue's thoughts. Dating? Didn't Evelyn say that I'm too busy, so she wants me to relax and watch the performance? That succubus said that, but didn't you see her intention? Most likely, she likes you. How did I cause such misunderstandings? You think I'm popular with women? Sherlock asked frankly. What if Evelyn expresses her feelings? Brue asked directly. Sherlock said, I'll decline. It's inconceivable for me to fall in love. The most important thing is that I don't have the prerequisites. Good, since Lord Sherlock is insistent. Brue had given up trying to persuade him. Sherlock said, I accepted her invitation because she's sponging off the dungeon, and I would like to get back some benefits. Wait, Lord Sherlock, is that what you were thinking? You're indeed a superior devil? Sherlock was unaffected by Brue's words, and he said, the main thing is the drama itself. Sherlock picked up the ticket with the words, the Great Devil, Michelangelo, on it. It shouldn't be a problem, right? Brue was dumbfounded, unable to see any problem with the performance. Sherlock pointed to the label, which showed that the main actor was someone called Morgan. This Morgan, he's the second successor to Eternal Fire, said Sherlock. He's interested in drama performance. He followed the drama troupe to Winterfell and is performing during his visit. Tisk. What a bummer for a successor. Do you think that Morgan is the one that they arranged to plot against you? Brue thought for a while and agreed. It's highly possible. You sent Andrew to prison. If Morgan is Andrew's brother and they are close, it's likely that he's here for revenge. I think it's important for me to watch the performance in order to understand the situation. Sherlock browsed the forum and smiled. Isn't it interesting? In a small stone room, in front of a standing mirror, succubus Evelyn wore a tutu skirt and posed here and there. However, she wasn't satisfied with what she saw and muttered, is it a bit too childish for me? Lord Sherlock will think I'm acting like a kid. No, I can't wear this. Evelyn shook her head and opened her closet. Then, she took out a long blue dress from her small collection of clothes and placed it on her body. Is this dress good? Wait, didn't I just try it on? Evelyn looked at her closet. She had tried all of the clothes on once. Her clothes were limited since she spent most of her salary on her basic necessities like rent, management fees, and living expenses. When she stayed in Sherlock's dungeon, she didn't have to pay expenses, and the food and lodging were provided by Eternal Kingdom, but she didn't have a salary. Without any savings, she couldn't buy any clothes. Moreover, she had been wearing work uniforms, so she didn't have a lot of clothes. Evelyn was feeling regretful. She didn't have a decent dress for her date with Sherlock. Dong, dong, dong. While she was deliberating on her clothes, she heard knocking at her door and was given a fright. She turned her head and asked, "Who is it?" "Miss Evelyn, it's me, Brainiac." It was the voice of Brainiac. What's the matter?" Evelyn was taken aback and asked nervously. "I'm here for the Adventurers Guild name list." Evelyn remembered that she had mistakenly brought home the name list, which should have been kept at the Adventurers Guild. She was thinking about the date all the time. Date? No, it wasn't a date. To express her gratitude to Lord Sherlock for taking care of her, she scrimped and saved to buy 2 drama performance tickets for them to relax. It wasn't healthy to sit in front of the Mana device called a computer. It was good to go out and take a breather. It would definitely be beneficial to Sherlock's health. But what about the clothes? She was vexed by the clothes not because it was a date but to show Lord Sherlock proper respect. He was a dungeon lord, after all. She couldn't wear clothes that were inappropriate for the occasion. She had to be prudent. She didn't have money to buy new clothes, so she could only make some modifications to her current stash. However, she wasn't a seamstress. Should she impose on the gnomes? They seemed talented in sewing. When they visited Winterfell, they created the Eternal Kingdom flag. No, 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 if she asked them for help, would they not know about the date? It would be embarrassing. Dong, dong, dong. Brainiac knocked on the door and asked, bewildered, Miss Evelyn? Ah, apologies, apologies. Evelyn opened the door in a hurry, forgetting she was wearing the kiddish tutu skirt. Brainiac stood without emotion at the door while he gazed at Evelyn, who panicked. I'm not trying out the clothes. I'm going with Lord Sherlock on a date. Ah, no. We're just watching a drama performance. Brainiac looked at Evelyn panicking, but he was unmoved. He said without emotion, I understand, but can you give me the name list? I need it for registration. Apologies, please wait for a while. Evelyn bowed to Brainiac and walked into the house. She grabbed the name list from the table and handed it to Brainiac. Thank you. Brainiac nodded and left without looking back. But Evelyn's gasp of surprise made Brainiac stop and turn back. What's the matter? No, it's not this problem. It's because Lord Sherlock and I are going to watch a drama performance. Lord Brainiac, it seems. Evelyn said in a probing tone, and Brainiac quickly replied, considering Miss Evelyn's contribution versus your expenses, I'm not surprised you're inviting Lord Sherlock to a show. But Miss Evelyn, you have to reconsider your clothing. You have to show respect to the dungeon lord. This dress isn't suitable for your age. That's brutal. Evelyn was devastated by Brainiac's words, and she went into a daze. Then, farewell. Brainiac turned to leave, and he had no intention of turning back. Though Brainiac had left, the conversation had been overheard by a group of goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. Though they couldn't do strange things like steal the NPCs' clothes, get into their houses by scaling the windows, or do weird things when the NPCs were sleeping, they could wait by the side for strange encounter missions. Though they might not be squatting down and waiting, passing by or stalking Brainiac was a common occurrence. The information from Brainiac and Evelyn's conversation was more than enough. Gosh, Shirley and Evelyn are dating? The game official is giving us love nuggets. Aren't Shirley and Brainiac in a relationship? Why is Brainiac so calm? Is he planning to kill Evelyn? Tisk. Such a conservatively dressed succubus is finally dating? I don't want to watch the plot of NPCs dating. I want to see Winterfell attacked and warriors of Eternal Kingdom descending from the heavens. I want to save the world. Don't worry, Evelyn, I graduated as a seamstress. Even the Winterfell teacher praised my workmanship. I'll take care of your dress for the date. Let's duel, Evelyn. Shirley's mine. Wah. Chapter 369. It's the game producer's fault. Evelyn didn't expect to be in such a situation. She also didn't expect to be surrounded by a group of goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men to come up with a plan. According to my skirt-chasing experience, if Shirley's not a fool, with Evelyn's figure and appearance, any dress can be a killer. Get lost, you trash. If any dress makes the cut, why would we go through all the trouble? The important thing isn't the dress. Isn't it the conversation? Though appearance is crucial, with Evelyn's killer looks, a dress is only a bonus. If she cleans her face, I feel Shirley won't be single after tomorrow night. Shirley is already with Brainiac. What do you mean by single? Evelyn was confused by the incessant chattering of the gamers. But some of them were serious in helping Evelyn for their strange encounter mission. 2 goblins were using tape measures to obtain Evelyn's measurements. Due to the difference in height, they had to stand on chairs and tables that were stacked together. From the content of the gamer's chat, these goblins were dual dressmakers both in the game and outside of the game. They were supposedly designers for a private fashion label. Though Evelyn didn't understand what they meant by inside and outside the game, seeing their proficiency, Evelyn trusted them. Before making the dress, they asked Evelyn some questions. Do you have a favorite color? No. Is there any color that you don't like? Yellow. I don't like yellow. What about style? Do you know what style Shirley likes? That, Shirley is Lord Sherlock. Not very sure. Lord Sherlock has been dressed as a gentleman, and you should be addressing him as Lord Sherlock, not Shirley. I understand. Perhaps he prefers the virtuous lady style? That's likely. How about adding a bit of the girl next door style? Shirley looks younger than Evelyn. Younger? Both goblins discussed Evelyn's age without restraint. How dare they alluded that Evelyn was older. She had just graduated, whereas Sherlock was a dungeon lord. They didn't offer a chance for Evelyn to explain. After taking the measurements, they proceeded to Winterfell to make the dress, as Eternal Kingdom didn't have magical sewing machines. Besides the dress, the gamers also offered other suggestions for the date. You have to know dating etiquette. As a lady, I have to remind you of certain things. Have to be late for a date? No, 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 it's no longer in vogue. The girl must be intelligent and present her good points. What does a guy like in a girl? Bring her out to show off. That's why you have to doll yourself up and attract the attention of everyone. When Shirley arrives, present your best angle. Then he will overhear the passers-by's compliments of you. Wah, she's beautiful. Is she waiting for someone? Waiting for her boyfriend? Oh my god, I'm so envious. That's frustrating. Why don't I have such a girlfriend? I want to have such a girlfriend. I'm willing to do anything. That's right, this kind of conversation. Shirley will feel proud and become your slave. Gosh, that's how it works. That's the reason Arthur Bro didn't propose to me. Oh, Sister Vannas? Did you skip too many steps? The gamers were having a fun time, while Evelyn was in a state of confusion. There wasn't much time since her date was tomorrow. Sherlock was dressed in a black wool coat that matched with a white and blue lined shirt, a pair of straight trousers, and black polished leather shoes. He was dressed in gentleman attire, but not because it was a date with Evelyn. He had to be presentable when going out with a girl, that was the principle. Tisk, you're so handsome today, Lord Sherlock. If the gamers see you, they'll spread strange rumors on the forum, Bruce said to Sherlock as he walked out of the door. They have already spread strange rumors. Sherlock looked at the surrounding gamers who had been waiting outside for him. It wasn't hard for Sherlock to guess their intentions. They wanted to report his whereabouts to Evelyn. Sherlock didn't understand. Her inviting him to the drama performance was a gesture of gratitude, so why were they so excited? Sherlock exerted his dominance to restrain the gamers, then he walked towards the teleport portal. The drama theater wasn't far from the teleport portal main hall. He hailed a Hades carriage and the journey took him 10 minutes. The drama theater's entrance was filled with many guests, and many creatures were buying tickets at a counter. This was a highly anticipated performance as it depicted the story of Michelangelo. To the inhabitants of the Underworld, he was a hero. Sherlock walked to the entrance and immediately noticed Evelyn, who was being discussed by the crowd. Compared to her usual conservative style, Evelyn wore a short skirt that was above the knees, and her upper body was clothed in a light blue tube top that revealed her shoulders and back. Not much material was used for the tube top, and while the quality of the material was good, it was without any special patterns. The design consisted of layers and layers of folds. Evelyn also wore a pair of stilettos. The fashion style attracted the attention of the Underworld residents, and they whispered to each other. What's with this succubus? Why did she dress like this? Though it's not inappropriate, the style is strange. Very ugly. She looks beautiful, but why is her dress so ugly? Did she give up on herself? Is she waiting for someone? Her boyfriend? If I was her boyfriend, I'd never appear. It's embarrassing. Is this a public punishment? Young creatures nowadays. Tisk, tisk. Evelyn's face wasn't red, it was a deep green. Sherlock didn't pretend not to know Evelyn. Instead, he walked directly to her. When Sherlock appeared, the crowd gave way and kept quiet. Many female creatures even looked jealous when they saw the superior devil. However, it wasn't because he was handsome, it was because he was Sherlock. The Dungeon Lord of Eternal Kingdom. Who didn't know him? Lord Sherlock. Evelyn lowered her head. If there was a hole, she would hide in it without hesitation. The dress is bold and a little weird, but it's not ugly, Evelyn. Sherlock smiled and extended his hand to Evelyn, and magical rings surrounded her body. Lord Sherlock? Evelyn looked strangely at the magical rings engulfing her. As for the creatures who had gossiped about her, they went into a daze and then went about doing their own things. I'm making you less conspicuous. Though she wasn't sure what mana skill it was, after the creatures in the crowd shifted their gazes, Evelyn felt much better. They chatted happily as they went into the drama theater. The gamers who were spying from a distance frowned. What happened? Why is this game not following the norms? There is absolutely no problem with my design. The problem is with the game producer. DMN the game producer. Just put all of the blame on the game producer. They ranted. Chapter 370. Man of Steel. In the dark theater, only the stage was illuminated. A tall superior devil wore a skeleton cloak and stood in the middle of the stage. A fireball was seen burning above his palm as he shouted, "Ah! The billions of angels in heaven, I, Michelangelo, shall lead my Hades army and crush you all." Sherlock and Evelyn were seated in the middle of the theater. Those were the best seats for watching the performance. However, the drama on the stage was lackluster. The dialogue was long and mundane, and the costumes of the actors were too exaggerated. Though the acting left much to be desired, the theater was full. It could be considered a successful performance just based on the number of people in the audience. Lord Sherlock, do you like it? Evelyn was feeling awkward. The standard of acting wasn't high, so she was worried and regretful, thinking Sherlock might not like it. But Sherlock liked it. Not bad. I'm happy to watch the performance with you. Lord Sherlock. Evelyn was touched. Bruce said to Sherlock, "Lord Sherlock, are you sure? You're happy with such a low standard? I thought we shared the same high standards for art. Do you expect me to embarrass a lady by saying awful words? I'm indifferent to drama. I can see that Morgan is willing to splurge. He is a proud and egotistical devil." "What, Lord Sherlock, what do you mean?" Sherlock quickly said, "I'm not passionate about drama. Even Evelyn isn't impressed by the acting and the props. Nevertheless, it's a full house. As the second successor to Eternal Fire, he could have paid the audience to come." "Yes, that is highly possible, Lord Sherlock. Perhaps Evelyn and I are the only real audience members." "No, there's another one." Sherlock turned his head to look at the theater entrance. Evelyn was telling Sherlock about the volcano in her hometown. Palm. The theater door was opened and attracted the attention of the audience, though the performance continued uninterrupted. Weak rays of light seeped in from the door and created a figure's silhouette. Evelyn found the silhouette familiar. When her eyes adjusted to the light and saw the face clearly, she jumped from her seat in shock and exclaimed, "Miss Lilo." "Shush." The surrounding audience members gestured Evelyn to keep quiet, and the entrance door was shut. Lilo was wearing her signature Lolita tutu skirt, and she held her head high as she walked towards Sherlock, not caring about the gazes from other creatures. Lilo walked past the rows of seats and arrived at Sherlock's location, gazing at a vampire who was sitting beside Sherlock. The vampire felt an unknown pressure, and after resisting for less than a second, he stood up. Lilo nodded at the vampire before sitting down. Miss Lilo, are you here to watch the performance?" Evelyn was watching intensely. Lilo nodded. Since Lilo wasn't willing to continue the conversation, Evelyn asked with hesitation, "That seat?" "It's not mine." Lilo looked at Evelyn and said, "I didn't buy a ticket. I'm late because I had to deal with the guards outside." "Deal with the guards outside?" Though Lilo replied casually, Evelyn felt she had heard something extraordinary. "So, are the two of you dating?" Lilo looked at Evelyn and asked. Dating? Dating. Evelyn stammered nervously, and Lilo said mercilessly, "It doesn't seem like a date." "Then I'll have a date with Sherlock." "What?" Evelyn exclaimed in shock. A few audience members behind her gestured for Evelyn to keep quiet. "Shush. Apologies for interrupting both of you. Have you considered my opinion?" Sherlock smiled as he looked at Evelyn and Lilo before saying, "Apologies, Miss Lilo, but I was invited by Miss Evelyn to watch a drama performance. According to your understanding, it's a date, so Miss Evelyn and I are greatly inconvenienced by your intrusion." Lilo lifted her head and stared into Sherlock's eyes, then nodded and said, "I see, I understand your intention. If I kill the main actor who is actively jumping around on the stage, will your date end?" Sherlock opened his mouth and was about to speak when Evelyn sprung from her seat. The audience members behind her gestured for her to keep quiet, but she glared at them, and they were intimidated. Evelyn said to Lilo, "Miss Lilo, please do not say such horrible things. Killing another creature is a horrible deed. Finally, we have a creature with common sense," Bruce said to Sherlock in his mind. "Even if you kill the main actor, my date with Lord Sherlock will not end." Evelyn shouted loudly, "Tisk! What's up with both of them? Lord Sherlock, perhaps it's time to extract yourself? Neither woman is in a proper state of mind." Sherlock ignored Bruce's suggestion. The performance on the stage came to an end, and the group of actors left the stage as the audience clapped loudly, and the curtains came down. Sherlock looked behind the heavy curtains and noticed the smiling Morgan gazing at him. The performance has ended, so let's go home. Sherlock stood up and clapped his hands as he said, "Both of you, stop bickering. Lord Sherlock, let's have some tea." Evelyn grabbed Sherlock's hand and shouted, "Let's watch a gladiator fight." Lilo grabbed Sherlock's other hand and said, "Oh no," Bruce said as he took delight in Sherlock's dilemma. Peasant held a shield and followed his comrades on the way to the 15-member instance dungeon of Spectre College. This time, they brought along superior equipment and minor healing potions. Most of the minor healing potions were made by members of the Pioneer Alliance and were sold at cost price to members. A small portion was obtained from outside their guild since the potion factory wasn't constructed, and very few members knew how to make them. Though the little fairy had started teaching potion concoction, very few gamers were being taught. Only the top 50 daily mission gamers were able to make it to the second day of the class. Some had to purchase the spots using magic stones, and the little fairy also had to find them pleasing to the eye. There was only one gamer whom the little fairy found pleasing to the eye, Raintia. Even though the Pioneer Alliance had 500 members, less than 10 members knew potion concoction. "I discovered that the game is making fools of us." Sylvanas examined her short bow for defects while she complained. The date of Evelyn and Shirley was interrupted by fallen angel Lilo of Victoria City. "Isn't she the leader of the opposing faction? Isn't Winterfell an ally of Eternal Kingdom? Why isn't Lilo blacklisted?" "That's nothing. The most exciting part is Shirley rejecting both Lilo and Evelyn." Not Wearing Pants found it funny, and he said, "There are screenshots on the forum." A gamer snuck into the theater and witnessed the entire incident. Shirley told them that he was going back to play computer gamers and rejected both Evelyn and Lilo's invitations. "I believe that Shirley and Brainiac are official CP, Burning Chesthair said as he nodded. "Chesthair, you're very gay." Peasant laughed heartily, and the other gamers nodded. Arthur sharpened his sword and counted the number of minor healing potions hanging from his waist. He said, "I'm prepared. This time, we'll conquer the instance dungeon." Chapter 371. Morgan. Number 58,956, 42,565, 58,585, and 25,654 candidates, prepare yourselves. The Level A examination is about to begin. The voice came from a crystal ball, and the 4 Lich candidates stood up immediately and started preparing for their examination. "Ah, finally, it's our turn. I thought I wouldn't be able to graduate." "Don't let your guard down, the Black Armored Knight seems to be coming." "What's the big deal with the Black Armored Knight? Many of our seniors trounced him and his team. We only have to delay for time, and we'll graduate." Everyone smiled happily, and none of the Lich students noticed that the gnomes were carrying vials with black-colored potions. This was the first time that the instance dungeon was conquered. 12 hours later. "Oh dear, I'm at my wit's end. This is the last one." Candidate number 58,956 placed both of his hands on the ground as he knelt down in a daze. "What happened? What's in those small vials? I slashed him. Why did he heal after drinking the contents of the vial?" Candidate number 42,565 also knelt on the ground and said in an aggrieved tone, "We can't defeat them. We can't defeat them." Candidate number 58,585 knelt down too. Only candidate number 25,654 gritted his teeth and persevered. His large, elite orc skeleton was cornered by the group of combatants from Eternal Kingdom. He went into a daze. While the Lich students were kneeling down in frustration, the gamers on the forum were celebrating because they heard about the conquering of the troops' training grounds. The most popular post, first clearing of Spectre College, troops' training grounds. It took 12 hours, was created by Not Wearing Pants. Since the bosses in the instance dungeon didn't have fixed skills, the gamers encountered different bosses every time. Hence, Not Wearing Pants post wasn't about the instance dungeon, it was on saving time. The most crucial item was the minor healing potion. Lord Sherlock, the minor healing potion provided much needed assistance. According to my back-end data analysis, the potion helped us earn 10% of the game's money and materials. "This is highly profitable," Bruce said excitedly while Sherlock browsed the forum. Very good. Just as I expected. We should come up with more magic potions. Then, the gamers will provide us with the materials, magic stones, and game currency that they have earned. Once they become poor, they will have to carry bricks diligently. I'm expecting another golden age in construction. It will become a positive loop cycle." Sherlock was happy and said in anticipation. A letter was thrown out from the dungeon core. It had the words, "Lord Sherlock, Winterfell office," on it. Sherlock tore open the letter and started reading. "Dearest Lord Sherlock, apologies for imposing on you, Lord Sherlock. The second successor to Eternal Fire, Morgan, wishes to meet you. Due to pressure from my superior, I had to write this letter of invitation. I understand that Lord Sherlock is extremely busy, so I won't be surprised even if you decline the invitation. I would appreciate a reply. Love from Nicholas, Lassie." Tisk. Does he treat Lassie as his name? Brew said immediately, "Decline it, Lord Sherlock. While you were watching the drama performance, he didn't look friendly. He must have ill intentions for meeting you. Why should I decline? Are we not worried about hidden plotters? It's better to meet him for peace of mind." Sherlock snapped his fingers, and a pen and a piece of paper floated up. The pen then started writing. It was an acceptance letter, and Sherlock sent it over. Before long, Nicholas acknowledged with a return letter. The meeting location with Morgan was the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall. Sherlock didn't want to waste his precious tea. Sherlock informed Eggface and Brainiac about the meeting, as they were his left and right-hand henchmen. Eggface was a black dragon who looked impressive. Moreover, he was familiar with secretary work. As for Brainiac, he was a rare genius lich and was also impressive. He was very capable and could handle all matters given to him. Eggface wore his formal wear and large-framed spectacles that were suitable for secretarial work. He also carried a leather briefcase. As for Brainiac, he wore his professor cloak to show his status as an academic. Besides Eggface and Brainiac, there was also a group of gnome guards. Brew chose 10 clean and fit gamers carefully and ensured that they wouldn't go offline abruptly. They followed closely behind Sherlock. This kind of Dungeon Lord meeting plot mission was rare, but it wasn't the first time for the gamers. With Sherlock's exertion of dominance, he was able to make the gamers keep quiet when the time came. Sherlock was familiar with the way to the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall. He led Eggface, Brainiac, and the gamers towards his destination. The passers-by would greet them and pay their respects. After all, they were the heroes that saved Winterfell and reorganized the old district. Now, there were no poor residents who were secretly studying. Instead, there was a helpful adventurers guild that assisted the residents with house chores. The residents were extremely pleased. "Welcome, Lord Sherlock. Lord Morgan is in the meeting hall with the Dungeon Lord." Sherlock arrived at the entrance of the Dungeon Lord main hall and saw a sludge monster butler waiting for him. Sherlock followed the butler to the meeting hall. Sherlock recalled that he met the other Dungeon Lords inside the meeting hall to discuss the ancient gods' crisis. The Dungeon Lord at that time had been Onionhead. Within a short period of time, there were 2 changes in Dungeon Lords. Things remained the same, but the creatures had changed. Sherlock pushed open the door and walked in. "Lord Sherlock." Nicholas stood up and greeting Sherlock with a warm smile, and an orc secretary was pushing a cart and waiting by the side. On the opposite side was a smiling young devil, Morgan. "Finally, I have the chance to meet you, Lord Sherlock. I'm Morgan." Morgan walked towards Sherlock and smiled as he said, "We met 2 days ago when you brought along 2 female partners to watch my performance. I recognized you at first glance and felt very honored." Nicholas was relieved to see Morgan being so cordial. Sherlock smiled and said, "I've heard of you. As the second successor to Eternal Fire, I've heard of your name while studying. Haha, let's sit down and chat." Nicholas pointed to the sofa, and Morgan and Sherlock sat down. The orc secretary placed a cup of bloody chrysanthemum tea in front of Sherlock. Eggface walked forward and took Sherlock's cup of bloody chrysanthemum tea, finishing it in a hurry. He licked his lips while putting the empty cup in front of Sherlock. "I've tested it, there's no poison." Eggface adjusted his spectacles and said seriously. Brainiac nodded at the orc secretary, who was in shock. Please pour another cup," Brainiac said. The orc secretary recovered and poured another cup of tea. Brainiac took out a new cup from the cart and placed it on the table. "Change the cup. Apologies. Sincere apologies." The orc secretary lowered his head and apologized while he poured another cup. Eggface was about to drink from his cup of tea, but he was stopped by Brainiac, who drank the bloody chrysanthemum tea instead. The tea flowed along his spine to his hips before dripping noisily on the ground. Lord Sherlock's subordinates are full of humor, Nicholas said after a long time. Let's discuss the main topic. Sherlock sat on the sofa and ignored the behavior of Eggface and Brainiac. He looked at Morgan and said, "Mr. Morgan, is there an urgent matter?" "Yes, I'm here to convey some news to Lord Sherlock." Morgan clasped his hands and said solemnly, "I'm here to kill Lord Sherlock or be killed by him. It's that simple." Chapter 372. The coming new situation. Because of Morgan's words, the atmosphere in the meeting hall became tense. Nicholas was grave, and he looked at Morgan and asked, "Wait a moment, Mr. Morgan, this joke isn't funny. Are you imitating the dialogue from The Forbidden Kingdom?" "No, I have made use of my personal influence and applied to the Devil Management Committee to declare war on Eternal Kingdom. Before long, Lord Sherlock will receive the notification from the Devil Management Committee. It will be a legal war to the death. After I win, I will take over all of your wealth and citizens. But I won't kill them, I'll torture them and let them pay the price for what they have done," Morgan said maliciously. "I don't understand. My citizens?" Sherlock frowned as he looked back at his restrained gamers and said, "What did they do to deserve your hatred? I remember that we were fighting Samael. On some level, we saved your brother. Isn't Andrew your brother? That's what I found out." "Andrew? I don't care about him. I'm talking about you, Sherlock. I want you." Morgan stood up and spread out his hands as he shouted loudly. The orc exclaimed in shock and covered his face. From the gaps in his fingers, his eyes exuded excitement and anticipation. Eggface looked at Sherlock and Morgan, then he lowered his head, nodded, and said, "Apologies, I'll move my nest away. To prevent any misunderstanding, I have to clarify, are you doing this because of Michelangelo's relic? Even if I'm killed, you can't get Michelangelo's relic." Sherlock immediately said, "Since you staked everything on this death war, even if the Devil Management Committee doesn't agree to your application, I'll agree to your request. My citizens and I will wait in my dungeon for your attacks. Can you reveal your total worth to me?" "Wait a moment, Lord Sherlock, you're fighting eternal fire. Let Winterfell mediate this misunderstanding," Nicholas said nervously. He tried to diffuse the explosive atmosphere between Sherlock and Morgan, but it seemed impossible. "Eternal fire won't be fighting against you, it's my own dungeon. I purchased a nearby dungeon and will use it to attack Eternal Kingdom." Morgan stood up and placed 2 tickets on the table in front of Nicholas and Sherlock. "These are tickets for the performance tomorrow. I hope that you can support me. Farewell, and see you on the battlefield, Lord Sherlock." Nicholas looked in disbelief at the back view of Morgan. He said, "Morgan, he likes to act." He thought of Sherlock and quickly said, "Lord Sherlock, though I know that you and your warriors are brave, it's better to appeal against such needless war. The other dungeon lords and superior devils will support your appeal. This kind of unreasonable war should be condemned." Nicholas spoke with agitation, but Sherlock didn't agree. He waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, Nicholas, Eternal Kingdom will never refuse a fight. Of course, I have no intention to involve you in Winterfell. Just watch from the sidelines." "Lord Sherlock," Nicholas said with concern. However, Sherlock lifted his hand and said, "Don't dissuade me. I won't refuse such a good deal. I'll return to prepare for the war." Sherlock left the meeting hall with Eggface, Brainiac, and the gamers, leaving a befuddled Nicholas inside the room. Good deal? The news of war between Eternal Kingdom and Morgan spread like wildfire on the discussion forum. There were many posts that had the following titles. "The war with the ogres hasn't ended, and we haven't fought with polio, but we have to abandon the new instance dungeon? A dungeon war is brewing. The clash of 2 dungeons. Victorian pigs, watch how we experience the new content with hate and jealousy. The Victoria City gamers are at fault. I will lodge complaints with the customer service Black Dragon. Please queue up. As a Victoria City gamer, I'm thinking of changing factions." There was a post that was hidden in the deluge of posts. "I am Hoodlum with weapon level 10. Hoodlum lay on the ground in darkness. His breathing was even, and his body remained motionless. The bearded sword trainer stood in the darkness and looked at Hoodlum, who was lying on the ground. The sword trainer had countless doubts in his mind. Why did the severely deformed Hoodlum have such strong willpower? No matter how tough the training was, he could complete it. Even if he suffered multiple fractures, he didn't feel anything. His fractured bones protruded out of his flesh, and he had to be healed by mana more than 10 times. It was as if Hoodlum didn't have any feelings, but that was impossible. During combat, he reacted to various wounds caused by weapons. This was a basic requirement for a warrior. If he was unable to feel wounds, how could he fight? After a hellish training regime, Hoodlum's combat skills improved by leaps and bounds. He had no fear of death, pain, or exhaustion, and he could even smile merrily. The sword trainer felt that he had wasted his life, even feeling fearful of Hoodlum. Within a short period of time, the sword trainer saw results. Hoodlum was breaking his limits, and he could defeat the guards with his hands. If he was given a weapon, the guards would have been dead. Of course, Hoodlum would also suffer serious injury. That wasn't important. He could see the unlimited potential of Hoodlum, who could become famous and be successful. And Hoodlum was his disciple. The bearded sword trainer calmed down. He would like to wake Hoodlum and continue the class, but nobody could force Hoodlum to do anything against his will, not even the sword trainer. He could only wait for him to wake up. It was almost time. Hoodlum slowly sat up exactly when the sword trainer had expected. Gosh, the Eternal Kingdom faction is so interesting. I wish I could join them. When I finish my chain missions, I'll kill Arthur. Hoodlum muttered to himself as he stood up. The sword trainer was used to his strange blabbering. He threw a longsword to Hoodlum, and its blade had been sharpened. Hoodlum, the goal of your practice has changed. You now have only one goal. The sword trainer trembled with unrestrained excitement. Use everything you know to defeat me. The busy Victoria City was almost complete. Houses constructed of wood and stone lined both sides of a road. The gamers were being strictly supervised by the 3 hamsters, so they couldn't deviate from the construction rules and regulations. The city of 5,000 was developed for over a month, and most of the gamers had built their own houses based on their hard work. Victoria City had more available land compared to the land's scarce Eternal Kingdom. Each gamer of Victoria City had a 10-square-meter house, which could be expanded in the future. However, the gamers of Eternal Kingdom didn't have such a luxury. This was a benefit for the gamers of Victoria City. At the outer boundary of the city, Edward Scissorhand kept his body as low as possible to hide, watching nervously. Edward Scissorhand was very worried that the forest would be cleared one day. He wasn't an environmentalist, but he was worried that he would have no cover after the trees were cleared. An elf who didn't have green words above his head was scolding a group of logging gamers because they exceeded the permitted limit. He then led the gamers to another logging area. Edward wasn't bothered by this, as his goal was to record a map of Victoria City. Over the past few months, Edward Scissorhand wasn't idling. Where he fell, he would pick himself up. That was his motto. Chapter 373. The forthcoming battle with Victoria City. Here, put more rocks here. Dragonborn stood on a city wall and directed the guild members to move rocks to designated locations. They were building a portion of the city wall that was assigned to their guild for that night with Sherlock. The previous wooden wall was used temporarily to defend against wild beasts. Before it was completed, the gamers weren't happy with the wooden walls. How could the Grand Victoria City use wood to make its city walls? They had to use rocks. The gamers started proposing this on the forum. The designer gamers came up with a simple construction method for the city walls, and they also planned the location based on the size of the city. This matter had to be discussed with Duchess Lilo. Otherwise, it would cost money to buy the land. Lilo wasn't concerned about the usage of land, she was only concerned about making the gamers powerful and using the crystal ball to spy on Sherlock. As far as the applications to use the land were concerned, Lilo approved all of them. The gamers were passionate in their work even though there were no rewards. It wasn't a problem for the sandbox building gamers. Victoria City only had the Ogre Fortress Instance Dungeon, the Sighing Wilderness, and the Spider's Lair for the gamers to explore. The requirements for the Ogre Fortress were too high. Though Dragonborn was qualified, his reputation level wasn't. Within a short time, none of the gamers of Victoria City would be able to enter the Ogre Fortress. The new Instance Dungeon was made for the gamers of Eternal Kingdom. Dragonborn, did you see the posts on the discussion forum? Hoodlum's weapon level is at 10. A human quickly ran over to Dragonborn and shouted, attracting the attention of other gamers. Impossible, Isn't Hoodlum currently captured and being kept as a slave? How can a slave train up their weapon level? And his weapon level is higher than Arthur? Is he bluffing? Take a spear hit commented condescendingly. Yes, perhaps he was online every day just to train his combat skills. Didn't he do other things? I don't believe it. Sealhead Ling Chong was skeptical, but the person who read the post shouted, "It's real." The forum post has a screenshot of his attributes. Take a look at Hoodlum's post. Let's take a look. Take a spear hit intended to go offline to take a look. It was then that he heard a swoosh sound and saw blood splattering in front of him. An arrow had penetrated his chest. Holy cow! Take a spear hit cursed and sat down slowly on a stack of rocks. Grotesque blood dripped all over the place, and he perished. There were sounds of galloping hooves. Within the forest, Edward Scissorhand wielded a bow as he took aim at Dragonborn, who was on the wall. With a swoosh sound, the arrow penetrated Dragonborn's throat, and he collapsed to the ground. Edward Scissorhand noticed that Dragonborn was their leader. Him going outside the city boundary to construct the city walls was careless. Edward Scissorhand knew that he had to seize the opportunity, so he led his bandits and charged out while they held the upper hand. Edward Scissorhand was right, as there were no reinforcements from Victoria City. The guild for that night with Sherlock only had 100 members, and less than 50 members were building the city walls. As it was at the border area, it was far from Victoria City. The forest didn't have wild beasts, so the gamers wouldn't go over there. Most of the gamers traveled to the Sighing Wilderness or the Spider's Lair via the teleport portal to obtain materials, earn reputation points, complete missions, and increase their weapon levels. Only those gamers who were allocated the mission to construct the city walls and those interested individual gamers would be here. Edward Scissorhand was merciless. With only tens of bandits, he killed everyone except for one prisoner. That human, who had green symbols above his head, laid on the ground while spitting blood. He lifted his hand with great effort, wanting to end his life with a dagger, but he didn't have enough strength. He scolded, "Gosh, why isn't there a self-destruct or suicide setting? Do they want me to die slowly? Hey, to have a quick death, answer our questions. Otherwise, I'll let you suffer for a few days before dying." Edward Scissorhand squatted down, using his large scissors to cut the person's fingers. Edward Scissorhand expected him to moan in pain, but that didn't occur. That person examined his cut fingers and looked at Edward Scissorhand in a daze as he said, "What's up? A strange encounter mission? Be honest. Answer our boss." Another bandit shouted loudly, "I understand, I'll cooperate with you. Please capture me and heal me, then sell me to a slave merchant. I'll be a powerful gladiator. Let me go through training. I'll have weapon level 10 like Hoodlum." The dying human gamer continued shouting. "What is this situation? How does he know about Hoodlum? How does he know that we sold Hoodlum to a slave merchant?" Edward Scissorhand looked furiously at him. He was greatly astonished. There must be a mole. A traitorous bandit must have divulged everything to Victoria City. Otherwise, how could Victoria City know? Perhaps Hoodlum used a special method to communicate with them in secret? However, it wasn't possible. "I'll tell you everything. We have 5,000 citizens who are mostly at the Sighing Wilderness. The city is now empty. If you walk south for 20 minutes, you'll reach the city. Believe me, at 4 to 5 a.m., I guarantee that there will be the least number of people. Take me with you, please. Let me be a slave. Let me be a slave, slave?" The voice of the gamer became weaker until he had no more breath. He didn't die, and he was panting from time to time as he stared at Edward and the bandits with his large eyes. "Boss, what he said matches Hoodlum's words. Hoodlum said that there are 5,000 of them and suggested that we attack at 4 to 5 a.m. What shall we do?" A bandit walked over and asked. Edward Scissorhand pondered for a while and asked, "How many bandits do we have?" "At our stronghold, there are 2,000 of us gathered from all directions." 2,000 bandits, it's sufficient. We'll prepare tonight and set off at 4 a.m. to attack Victoria City. A dying person has no reason to deceive us. This is a good opportunity. If we're successful, the wealth of Victoria City and the thousands of slaves will be ours. Edward lifted his arms and looked around viciously as he said, "I know you're worried after our last attack because we couldn't defeat them. However, we only had 200 bandits. This time, we have 2,000. They won't be our match. So what if they're fearless? We'll use our bows to kill all of them. Boss is correct. Kill all of them. Rob them. Capture them as slaves. The bandits cheered wildly before Edward Scissorhand led them away. The time was ripe. Though they didn't know where the sighing wilderness was, they didn't see the group of humans, fairies, and elves moving around. This was the best chance. The bandits gave the dying gamer a quick death before leaving. The bandits didn't know that after the gamer perished, he walked out from the teleport portal naked and sounded the alarm. Then, he collapsed to the ground. He had gone offline to create a post on the discussion forum. The gamers of Victoria City were excited. They thought the game producers had forgotten about them. The gamers captured a few horses in the previous bandit attack. This time, the gamers wanted to have more horses. After all, those were free horses. Edward Scissorhand didn't know that a nightmare awaited them. Lancelot was nervously preparing for war by digging ditches, setting traps, and accumulating combustible items at the center of the city. The wooden planks of doors were stripped to be used as shields against arrows. There were also sand and water jars for fighting fires. The most common mode of attack was incendiary attacks. If Lancelot was Edward Scissorhand, he would fire off a volley of incendiary arrows. When chaos reigned, the riders and troops would charge in. So all the preventive measures had to be taken. Lancelot wasn't worried about whether they would lose. The bandits only had 2,000 members to fight against the 5,000 citizens of Victoria City who were blessed by God Almighty and were fearless. The bandits had no chance of victory. That was what Lancelot believed.